Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the Health, Seniors, Human Services, Youth, Education, and Human Rights Committee meeting of Manhattan Community Board 3. My name is May Lee. I'm the chair of the committee. I will be just reviewing tonight's agenda, but before I do that, I'm going to hand it over to our Zoom facilitator, Larissa Shainberg, and she will explain the procedures of the meeting.
Hi, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the meeting. Before we get started, I have a few guidelines. First of all, I want to remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded. If you are not a member of our committee, please sign in as a guest by registering your name and your affiliation, if that's applicable, in our chat box. During the course of the meeting, we ask that everyone remain muted unless they are speaking. During the meeting, our chair will take questions first from the board members and then afterwards from the public members. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. In order to speak, you can unmute yourself by pressing the mute button on the left side of your screen. If you're joining by phone, just tap the mute button on your phone. You can temporarily unmute yourself by holding the space bar down if you prefer that. If you are joining and you would like to ask a question by raising your hand, there is a raise hand button in the participants feature at the bottom near the center of your screen. If you're joining by phone and would like to raise your hand, that is *9. During the meeting, I will be monitoring the chat. Please keep the chat to technical issues only. I will be monitoring and coming around to help anyone who's having any issues. If there's too much chatter in the chat box, we will have to shut it down. Okay, but thank you and welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Larissa. So today's meeting, we will have our agenda items will be, the first one will be a discussion of the proposed homeless shelter safe haven stabilization bed facility at 100 Orchard Street. We have guest speakers from the Department of Homeless Services, as well as the service provider, Not on My Watch.
Great.
The second thing we will talk about is planning for a parent resource fair, for public school children in our area. The third thing we will have is reports from the CABs and the CECs. Those are advisory bodies that we regularly attend. And, that'll be pretty much the whole meeting. Before we start, though, we will have approval of the minutes and also roll call for the committee members. So first of all, are there any committee members received the minutes of the last meeting? Does anyone have any changes? Okay, so it looks like there are no changes. So that means the minutes have been approved. Okay, so Thomas, can you do the roll call?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. We're going to start off. May Lee.
Here, yes.
Okay. Larissa.
Present.
David Crane.
Here.
Okay. Eric Diaz.
Yes. Here.
Shirley Fennessy.
Yes.
Deborah Jeffries Glass. Deborah. Let me know. Tatiana.
Yes, here.
Paul Rangel.
Oh, yeah, Paul is out. He's not going to be in today.
Okay. Heidi.
I'm here.
Ricky Wong.
Here.
And Carmen Perez.
Present.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Reverend Q, do you have a slideshow you wanted to show?
Yes, I did. And if you could create a share screen, that would be amazing. And I'll get right into it.
Okay, give me just a moment to change you over to a guest. I'm sorry, to a co-host. Bear with me.
I feel
And
privileged.
you, oh,
Okay,
you're
so,
being
okay.
promoted.
You know what, before the Reverend begins her presentation, can I just say a few words just in terms of the overview of the project that we're talking about right now?
Yeah, okay,
that
we're
be
just
all
trying to make sure that's set up, but when you're ready, you can begin.
I'm ready.
Okay, me? Are you talking to me?
Whatever you have.
Okay, yeah, great.
So
I just
you're
wanna say a
all
few
presenting in a group.
ready.
You decide
Yes,
how you're
so let
going
me
to do
just
it.
say a few words, Reverend, and then I'll turn it over for you for your presentation. Is that
Okay.
all right?
Okay,
All right, well, thank you.
absolutely.
Good to see everyone again. Reverend Q, good to see you, of course. I'm such a pleasure to be here tonight. Tonight, we're really going to be focusing on the 46-bed stabilization program that we're talking about for the property at 100 Orchard Street. It's so important that we have this program, really, because it's a key element. Stabilization beds are a key element in making sure that we take care of our street homeless population. Our street homeless population is obviously incredibly vulnerable, and because of COVID, they become even more vulnerable, which has really helped precipitate the need to have this project. One of the reasons that we've become even more vulnerable is because of actually one side effect of COVID has the governor's decision to close the subways at night between 1 and 5. And subway systems are many things, but at night, oftentimes they are places of refuge for individuals who are experiencing street homelessness. And closing those subways has actually created a situation which many folks don't have a place to go. So that's been one thing. And on top of that, on COVID, it's not just the subways that have been closed has been an issue, but obviously COVID has also resulted during the day in the closures of churches, 24-hour food restaurants, emergency rooms, libraries, and other locations that are frequently used by those experiencing street homelessness. And the closure of these spaces has expanded our need to seek available beds whenever we can. And we were very fortunate to be approached by Reverend English about this site, and very happy to be working right now towards a stabilization bed program. There has also been plans in the works for a safe haven, but to be clear, that is our intention. We still have to go through a series of processes before a safe haven can happen, including fair share, environmental assessment study. So there are a series of regulatory steps that have to be taken place. So we are not tonight talking necessarily about that safe haven. Rather, we're talking about really the work that the Not On My Watch is going to be doing at this site while it's a stabilization bed with those 40 up to 46 beds. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over to the Reverend who has been so excited to talk to you all, and I'm so glad that she can do it tonight. So yes, Reverend, you want to go ahead?
Thank you so much, Matt. I have been excited about talking about this. I think, the first point that resonates with me is your statement of have a place to go. And I'm thinking about the fact that I'm sitting here in a warm room.
Yes.
That I can turn the heat up.
Zoom conference call about the homeless shelter. What's up?
Hi. Okay, excuse me, if you're not talking, can you put yourself on mute? I mean, if you're... Oh, thank you. Reverend Q, why don't you continue?
Thank you so much. I'm just going to reiterate, I think Matt hit the nail on the head when he said, don't have a place to go. And I think about my settings right now, being able to turn up the heat, down the heat, be comfortable, don't have to have a coat or anything anything like that right now in this moment. And I think that's where I'm going to start this conversation. Don't have a place to go, because that's what this is all about. And I know that many of you know what has happened years ago with our homeless right in this district. And for me, being able to create this piece for those that are suffering, I'll be honest with you, the last couple of days, when the temperature has been reported and the snowstorm was reported, my heart was really sinking, because I'm thinking of those that are homeless in these positions, in these areas that don't have a place to go. And so our whole piece right now is just about how do we create it where they do have a place to go, creating the safety in our neighborhoods and with our residents. How does this all work out? And yes, like Matt said, I was excited about this conversation. I'm excited about this conversation because of my personal passion and because of where we are now as a city in this, what I considered world 2.0, that we don't have all the answers. We don't. But what can we do to help solve like this age, like years and years problems that we have experienced as it relates to homelessness? What can we do? And how do we create the partnership with our community? And I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm very excited about this conversation because I know who we are as an organization. I know who we bring to the table, and I know what we can help solve that horrific question, which is those that don't have a place to go or a place to call home. So while we're evaluating this whole piece of what your concerns are and what we're able to bring to the table as an organization, we want to bring that happy medium tonight to say, you working on your side and we work on our side can help solve this problem. So I'm gonna go right into the presentation. I'm gonna share our screen, and just so you know, I am not like this major computer literate person, but I'm gonna share the screen. But Matt, you just hit a chord when you said don't have a place to go. And I just had to elaborate on that. But let me share the screen right now. And please tell me that everyone can see the screen. Can you all see the screen? Yes, just shake your head.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, so let's just walk through the screen that I have in front of you. The first thing I want to say is first, Sue and the team, I know I'm new. I'm a new face. We're a new organization. I know everything about us is new. But I want to say thank you for allowing us the opportunity tonight to present to you our future community, our future neighbors. I hope that tonight's discussion will open the door for future discussions as we learn more about not just the community, and as you learn more about our organization, not on my watch. I want to start by talking about our team and perhaps dispelling a few uninformed assumptions. So I'm going to go to the next slide. I want you to hear who we are as a team. The Not on My Watch team brings over 20 plus years of experience working with New York City homeless population in shelters. They've worked alongside state and local government agencies throughout their tenure. The team has led affordable and supportive housing development and management projects, and have developed programs that provide services and support to homeless individuals, victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. And when you think about that, when those types of individuals walk through our doors, our competitive advantage is being able to see what they have, these atrocities head on, and be able to provide services immediately. The work specifically for New York City homeless population in shelters, the staff has performed the following, and that is overseeing the operations for 3 DHS shelter contracts that provided over 600 beds to homeless individuals. The reason why I'm bringing that out, as you can see here, our team is very familiar with working with this populations. We are not the newcomers on the block. They have oversaw overseeing 300 affordable housing units and over 175 supportive housing and transitional shelter units. Their work include budget development, program management, maintenance and security, preventive maintenance programs. They developed and managed social enterprises to generate revenue for the jobs, for the program jobs for program participants. They assisted in the operational planning and development of several affordable supportive housing sites throughout New York City. And I want to accentuate this in the clinical field, our team, not on my watch, brings over 25 years of relevant experience. And we're proud to have one of our staff members serve as a member of the United Nations 58th Commission for Social Development to end homelessness around the world, where their co-advocacy assisted in developing the UN's resolution on homelessness. So our whole mentality around this space isn't to just provide shelters, but provide what's next for these individuals that are in these shelters. The Nanamawash team, and I need you to know this as well, as we think about our relationships in the city and in the state, so you can be very clear of what we bring to the table to help us facilitate what's at hand. We have worked with both city and state agencies from DHS, HACA, OCD, GDVBB, which I actually helped create in the mayor's office, which is now, the Office to Combat Domestic and Gender-Based Violence, which only at one point focused on domestic violence. Our organization was able to create a change in that organization to put over $1 million, approximately $1 million, I should say, toward combating human trafficking in our city. We got MOIA, OHMH, HBD, HRA, and the list continues. We have extensive relationships with our DA from Manhattan to Bronx and Brooklyn, where even in Brooklyn, we have been able to influence the Brooklyn DA in how he moves about these avenues in creating justice for some of the populations that we serve, which can be verified directly by his office as it relates to my relationship personally and our relationship as an organization, not on my watch. The state agencies that we have had relationships with, you can see, DOS to, ODIDA. So my point is that we're not new in this, and we know what it means. And relationship is extremely important to us from a state, city level, but also when we talk about our community. And the one thing I want to emphasize here, that when we think about our relationships, I want you to know that when we thought about bringing our program director on board, we thought about the person with you in mind. Our program director, so he's a perfect fit, not only for Not On My Watch, but for community-wide. We can't separate that. For one, he knows the area because he lives in the area. Our program director lives in the district in which we plan to bring this shelter in. And of all the ones that we would have interviewed and would have sat with, it was important to us that it was somebody that had the heart of community, even if he didn't necessarily live. Like, what if he didn't? It was important to us that somebody that came to the table that was interested in building relationship, because that's who I am. If you look at everything I've done personally, it's all about building relationship and building bridges with entities that may not normally come together. That's my forte. And so he coming to the table with over 15 years in this place, and he lives in one of his top priorities, even in our discussions, that he's now so excited about him being on our team, is to make sure that the neighbor and High Point residents are connected. So not only when we talk about later, will our security personnel make rounds, he also is committed to making rounds in our district. He's also committed to meeting with our clients, which provides additional security for High Point and our neighbors, which you don't hear a lot about. You hear about case managers meeting with clients, but he is personally committed to meeting with every client that steps their foot through our doors at High Point. And I just want to say this, right before we go into the nuts and bolts, I want you to hear a little bit about me. And I think that's important because I'm very passionate about this. And I'm very passionate about not only about what happens on the inside and the transformation that can take place on the inside, but what safety looks like on the outside. I remember growing up, I'm from Spanish Harlem. My mother's, my whole family Spanish Harlem, right? So I know every area, from the domestic violence to the assaults. I'm a NYCHA born person, okay? But when I think about this point, High Point, which I feel is a very appropriate name, because our goal is to bring our residents to their highest point. I'm not satisfied with just providing a bed and meals. That's not, to me, what productivity is. It's about how do we get them to their next. I always think about their next. If you look at my past resume, when I ran my criminal justice reform, those coming out of probation, those coming out of jails, and my record of seeing people from Washington, D.C. coming in to see my program, why it worked, why my recidivism was low, how was I able to create to develop the first person in the city of New York to work for the Department of Probation that was an ex-felon. First person who now is on his second degree as a master's, because I am able to see beyond what the label is. And so just as I've been able to see beyond the label, everybody in my organization that I ran previously, and I'm very proud to say, credible messengers who were able to transform lives of those that came out of prison, came out of probation, who are now in colleges, jobs, etc., and now were visited as a model organization who had one of the lowest recidivism rates. It is my goal and aspiration that I see beyond, as a leader of this organization, of what people label and what their potential is in becoming and occupying permanent residents that they can thrive in what they can in what they can see as their potential to become more. And so I don't come here with, let's see if this can work. I come here with, I've proven it. And I'm saying that in all humility, because of the people that we have produced that became a model from what we were able to successfully do in other neighborhoods. And so here in 100 Orchard Street, I'm looking to be able to not keep this population in a box of, I'm going to always be in a shelter. But what is it we can do as an organization? And please accept my passion, because I'm very passionate about this. as an organization to move you from where you are today to where you could be, because I've seen it happen in my experience. So as I talk about their experience and I talk about, my experience, I want to move on to, let's talk about the nuts and bolts of 100 Orchard Street. When we think about, you want to know what's going to happen when they walk through those doors, right? So we're going to get that call. They're going to tell us we got a new client arriving. Right away, we're going to get that room prepared. The room more than likely will be prepared. And we're going to have a care package prepared, right? We're going to have that care package prepared because we're also very COVID sensitive, pandemic sensitive. I'm going to talk about that later. And just general things from toothbrushes, et cetera, that you would know that what a care package should look like. And even when I went through it with my mom, having homeless people in my home, I never thought I'd be back at this place, but there's a reason why I am. And because of what my mom said as an example, and when the AIDS epidemic hit, and what I was able to do as a person in a house of worship to be able to create, here's your food, here's your packages, and here's where you can go. While we had a high number of deaths as a result. And among that high number of deaths was my brother, who died at a very early age of 33 because we didn't have what was in place today back then when it came to AIDS. But my point is that when I think of care packages and outreach and making sure they're taken care of, it's maybe one of the things that was not done for my brother. And so when we move from the care package, we're going to get the outreach worker to bring client to, to the facility. We're going to take the temperature, right, by our staff. The care package will be distributed with PPEs and toiletries. At intake, the staff will capture name and contact number, et cetera, which is standard. I think the thing that's going to be happening is that even in the midst of all this, we will have our, plexiglass to protect all that's involved. And I'm also not just thinking about those that are walking in, I'm also thinking about my staff. My clients offer food, they're escorted to their room, and their food offering, if they come in during the time we're serving meals, obviously they're going to be a part of the meals. If they don't, we're going to offer them something and they're going to be escorted to room. What's important to me, the rules and regulations of the residence is reviewed with the case manager that's on site. And when that's going to take place depends on when they come in. We're going to set an appointment with the client to review independent living plan, including our good neighbor policy. And in that we'll have and as I told you, our program director is very hands-on. He will be involved, and it doesn't take place in all of the these shelters where he is personally involved in meeting with the clients. Now, I want you to know in this communal space that we are definitely going to be providing residents a COVID compliant community space to eat 3 meals a day, as well as engage in leisure activities. And when you think about that, when we think about the communal space and we think about COVID, and when we think about our stabilization, this is a short term, it's an emergency. So it's leisure activities during stabilization. It's like TV, board games, and card games, and we'll have movie nights and possibly classes on independent living that would include budgeting. But our focus on our clients' day-to-day activity, focusing on individual independent living plan, which would include, as I mentioned, housing and budgeting. We also will see that we would have online learning on computer. Again, this is our stabilization piece, which is emergency and which is short term. I think it's important that you know as a community what our security plan looks like. And this is very important to us when we thought about it. We're going to have 24/7 contracted security company, 3 shifts with a minimum of 1 guard per shift. And this is stabilization. CCTV monitored and recorded 24/7 We have cameras placed throughout the entire building, including entrances, exits, hallways, stairwells, elevators, and all common areas. We'll have a comprehensive and fully customizable workforce management solution that provides an added layer of security. Which will provide accountability. Listen to this. We're going to be tracking the guards' movements to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do, and their company requires this while on site. They give specific orders for making rounds and reporting incidents, and all data is logged in real time. You got the front door access control system. Our security staff, our commitment to you, our residents, to perform hourly perimeter tours, and will report any findings to appropriate entity such as DHS, outreach team, or NY PD. And when we think of this, security plan, just so you know, the security vendor that we have brought on board, they're familiar with shelter management and holds several contracts with DHS shelters. The staff and security team will work closely with NYPD and the community members to determine when additional security might be needed based on what is happening in the neighborhood, for whether it's special events or holidays and weekends. When you think of the CCTV, the closed circuit television, just so you know that our organization is able to receive alerts and view video camera footage. So we have intercom, buzzer, and camera on the front door to allow security to control access to the building after hours. We take this very seriously, not just for our residents, but for our community. And the staff are going to have swipe cards or keys to enter, while residents will have to be buzzed into the building. In addition, all residents will be required to sign in and out of the building. This is very, very important to us. The shelter is going to be fully staffed, 24/7, 3 shifts, and coverage will be provided for intake, case management, housekeeping, COVID screening, food services, security, and overall program resident management. But I want to talk to you about the COVID piece, because providing shelter in the midst of the pandemic is a concern not only to you as residents, but also to us, and also to us as an organization. And we take the pandemic very seriously. And I personally, because my husband almost died to COVID. So we're going to be very firm in assuring, and I thank God that tomorrow we celebrate our 39 years of marriage. But he almost died to COVID. So I take it very seriously, and so does our organization. So we're going to be very firm in assuring CDC guidelines are followed to assure safety for the residents within the dwelling and those outside the dwelling, our neighbors. So what are we going to have? Make sure that's in place for you to assure that comfort is temperature taken by staff, routine testing provided. We're going to have plexiglass protection for intake personnel and security provided. And then we're going to have dedicated isolation. You know what we decided? You know what? We're going to have a holding room for anyone that's diagnosed with COVID. So we have a dedicated isolation holding room if one is diagnosed with COVID. We have an off-site vaccination by appointment for residents, and that's great in partnership with DHS. We're going to have mass provided hand sanitizer at entry and in all common areas. Those who refuse, just so you know, to wear a mask, they're not going to be allowed in common areas. Stay in your room. That will not take place because we are serious about the safety of our residents and the residents that leave that place. So they will not be allowed in common areas. Social distancing guidelines adhered to, and even in our room configurations. We don't have people on top of one another. We have followed the guidelines to assure that even in our room configurations, that our people are protected to the best of our ability. Best of our ability. Once a resident tests positive, that person and his or her roommate are brought to the isolation room, and DHS, our amazing partners, is notified by the supervisor on site. The residents will remain in isolation until DHS arrives to pick them up. DHS will bring the residents to a COVID isolation shelter to quarantine and monitor their symptoms. But once the call has been made, staff works to identify anyone else, whether it's staff and residents, because we're into protecting all that they might have been in contact with while on site. And so those individuals are then notified by the program director and must be tested. And then we move on to the custodian staff. The custodial staff who have been trained in COVID-19 protocol is brought in to disinfect the room, including sheets and towels. All common areas will be cleaned daily. The surfaces wiped down. You got the wipes and hand sanitizers will be available in the common areas as well as in each room for residents to use at any time. Again, we take this seriously. All rooms will be disinfected and thoroughly cleaned in between resident stays. Residents in our High Point residents, they're responsible for maintaining a clean living space. I'm very adamant about that. My vision is to create something that a person like you and I or anyone can feel comfortable to moving in and living. I'm not looking at having a shelter that is subpar living, that hangs out in the gray sheets and the gray blankets and battered walls. That's not what we're providing. We're providing living space that people can call a place that they can be proud of living in temporarily until they move in to their permanent residence. That is very intentional on our part because everyone need to be treated with dignity and not by a label. And that is very important to me as the president and CEO of Not On My Watch, as I remember my household in my young years of seeing those that were not treated as such. So we'll have periodic room checks by RAs that will take place to ensure that they comply. If the room bathrooms are not clean, the staff will schedule the custodial staff to clean the room. The cleanliness is, and me personally, is very important to avoid anything that is not wanted in the resident beside the resident themselves. I want to talk about—
Excuse me, Reverend Q, can I interrupt you for a minute? Can you tell me how much longer you have
5 minutes.
for the presentation? Because we want to have time for a conversation with people that are present here today
5 minutes.
as well.
5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about type of services, and that's why I'm trying to include as much answers to potential questions in my presentation so there won't be duplication and that new questions can arise post my presentation. But when you think about my type of services in the stabilization place, we got 24/7 security. We got case management services to liaise with DHS street team. We're going to provide 3 healthy meals per day to residents. When we translate it over,
Well,
or move
with
over,
Reverend Q, just in terms of for the safe haven, let's just pause on the safe haven for now.
stabilization. Huh?
Let's just pause. Let's just skip the safe haven for now because it's not
Okay,
it's
let's
not a
move.
safe haven yet.
Okay, community engagement. When we think about Not on My Watch outreach to date and what's planned, we've already met with the commanding officer. My thing is, you know, I work deeply with NYPD, strong relationship with the current CO, strong relationship. As a matter of fact, they reached out to me as far as the state requirement plan for NYPD to see what that looks like. So I've already met with the commanding officer prior to this call, Garcia. I met with the NCOs because I'm very involved in NYPD throughout the city. I met with the community affairs officer. We actually went on a tour. They drove me around the district, Aranella and Justin. They drove me around the district so I can understand what's there and who's who, and got a quick education. I also plan to have them be a part of, you know, seeing our layout, what, you know, who's going to be, you know, what our room layout is going to look like in the place. My project director, program director is already going to be a plan to attend the Safe Precinct Build a Block monthly meetings. That's a definite. We have to be informed of what's going on. They're going to stay up to date on CB3 happenings. We're gonna meet all the local business owners. We already got a call. We're gonna be reaching out. They were closed today, but even like the museum across the street, you know, they have like these kids tours. We're gonna make sure we're sensitive to that and knowing their dates of when that's gonna be happening and what we need to do when that happens, because we're sensitive to community, what's gonna be going on. We're gonna be creating the local business owners meetings, and we're going to be forging linkages with providers that can be an aid to our residents. And lastly, here's my last slide. You're going to be provided, just so you know, you're going to know our head security personnel, his email, his cell phone number. You're going to have our on-site landline. And when I'm going to just backtrack, when we do talk about the CB3 meetings, Sue's going to let us know who the people should, you know, what meetings we should be attending. We're going to follow her lead in that. You're going to have the cell number and email to our program director. And lastly, you're going to have the cell number and email to our chief program officer. In the meantime, questions, inquiries, please, deb@nomwi.org. Please feel free to do that post this conversation. Now it's open for Q&A. Thank you again for your time. Thank you, Sue, for pulling us together for this very, very important conversation. And I just really wanted the residents and those that are part of CB3 to hear our heart, to hear where we're coming from and what we plan to do in your neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it's time for questions and answers. I will take questions from the committee members first, and any community board staff. Susan Stetzer. Yeah, you can. So everyone, if you have questions, you should raise your hand, and you will be called upon. So it's Susan, and then Deborah Glass. Susan?
Yeah, sorry, I got on mute. Thank you. First of all, I'm very curious about this change of from not talking about the safe haven. We didn't discuss that. You know, I've been in contact with all of, you know, everyone, DHS and Reverend Q, and no one mentioned that before tonight. So I'm very curious about that. But in the meantime, I had also sent some questions about the facility and to just talk about the stabilization beds. First of all, I want to say stabilization beds are absolutely needed right now. They have provided beds for homeless street people in our community who would not go into shelters and who were not eligible for one reason or another or had beds available for safe haven. So stabilization beds are really necessary. Could you tell us how many people per unit? Is this men and women? I had asked to what common rooms are like. We want to know what's going to be available in the facility. How much, this is not something we'd usually ask, but I'm wondering how much money you're actually putting into creating stabilization bed facility and how that's going to impact a transition to the safe haven. And you talked about case management, no other specific services. My understanding is that stabilization beds do not come with very many services. So I would like to know specifically what you will be providing. And when you say case management liaison with homeless outreach, is the case management actually done by the homeless outreach team and you liaise with them? Is that what that means? And those are my questions for now.
Oh, you can answer the questions now if you have the answers.
Well, yeah, thank you, May.
So the case management will be done. This is Shane. There'll be cases in the team, the my watch team can speak to it, but it'll be done by staff on site as well in conjunction with the outreach team. So we'll be following up with the outreach teams, working together on the cases. Absolutely.
I don't, if I could just ask, I don't understand how the outreach team is still involved. So you're doing the case management. How is it and what is it that the homeless outreach team is still doing?
It would depend on the case. I mean, if the outreach team had a particularly good relationship with the client and is far along in the case, maybe if they've already had a housing package established, it would be in conjunction with the case manager. They may take the lead still in working with the client, or it may be something on site where the client and the case management on site takes the lead. It's just sort of case by case, depending on the client and what works best for the client. And sometimes the clients may also have relationships with the outreach teams that they want to keep and they feel really comfortable. So, but it's not to say that the case manager on site won't be providing a lot of work. They'll just be doing it in conjunction.
Okay, so is this men and women or one or the other?
It's men and women.
Both.
Both,
Men and
yeah.
women, yes.
And how many people in a unit, and are there some units that will be for couples?
No, right now it has a maximum of 46 units, and I think given COVID, it's going to be a very slow ramp up to get to that number, and kind of evaluated constantly around COVID and around the dynamics and what we can do to keep people safe there.
Is that 2 people per unit?
Not necessarily. I think our overall number we're just looking at is 46. 46 is the number we're looking at with the slow onboard.
Is that, and how many units are there?
2 per unit. It's
Pardon?
basically 46 as it relates to COVID. That's what we're looking at. And it's going to be a slow onboarding as a result.
So there's 20.
The number you need to think about is 46.
So are there 22 units?
There's 46 that we're looking at bringing on board, and it's not necessarily based on the total number of 22 units, as some will have different configurations as far as how many can be in each unit. What we're really looking at is the total number, which is 46 at this point, with a slow onboarding.
And will you accept couples?
We're right now looking at individuals, adults, of men and of women. And if we want to talk to that more, Shane or Deb, with the specifics of that. Deb?
I think you're keeping it open to couples. If that is clinically appropriate and it's a possibility, then we may bring it in, but right now I'd probably prioritize for individuals,
Yeah, right now. it's
given the spacing and what it looks like.
Yeah.
Even-
Wait,
you know,
Lonnie will
again,
probably
clinically
wanna see
appropriate.
on
If it's
the
an appropriate
IMS.
place, an appropriate placement, then possibly.
And then could you speak to what services will be offered and what the common spaces will be like? Because there's no outdoor space, so I think common space is very important.
Yeah, there is no outdoor space, and what I had shared earlier, stabilization is very limited as it is an emergency shelter. You know, so we're looking at very basic communal space activities, while we're helping them to think about and imagine moving from temporary to permanent and offering housing, counseling. But when you think about the different activities that will take place on site during this phase, we're looking at, you know, movie nights, very minimal activities as it relates to online training or online activities that can be enhanced where their current position is via computer. We're looking at just very basic things as it relates to improving their current status as it is temporary emergency placement. Deb, do you have anything to add to that? I don't know if Deb is on the line, if she's still on the line.
Yes, I'm still on the line. As far as it goes with activities, I need everyone to keep in mind that we need to practice social distancing. And so under stabilization, we will have limited activities, but the community rooms will be open, but only a certain amount of people will be able to go into them. We have 2 community rooms. Also, we'll have a lot of one-on-one with the case manager as well as the program manager, because a lot of the residents coming in will not have any ID or know that they're eligible for certain benefits. So that is also a part of what we will be doing. It may not be an activity, but it's something that needs to happen.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Does that
Was that
answer
it?
your question? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Next will be Deborah Glass, followed by Eric Diaz, followed by Megan Joy.
Hi, thank you so much. Susan asked a couple of the questions that I had. One of them was a question about the designation of a safe haven. But in one of the slides where you talked about the ways that you would be deploying folks who worked at the shelter on a daily basis, you use the term a customizable workforce solution in working with the residents there. Can you describe what that might? I guess I'm just not quite clear what that means. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, for your question. I'm going to defer that to Jen and to Deborah. Let me find that slide that you're referring to. We're getting to that slide. I think I know what you're talking about. Hold on one second.
It was a slide that had a whole list. There were sort of multiple bullet points in the slide.
Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can find that. Was that the client intake process that you were referring to? Was it something outside of that? Or was it the information on the pandemic? I'm sorry if you could.
It was before that. It was fairly early in your presentation. You know, I'm sorry, I don't have it, but I think you were talking about the way you were talking about security, you were talking about, oh, I know when it was, you were talking about the fact that it's a contracted security force, or that it's an outside company that you all work with. And it was in that, it's somewhere in that description. And it was the phrasing customizable workforce solution. And I wasn't sure what that was referring to.
Okay. I am actually trying to find it, and I'm sure we have it in there if you remember seeing it. Okay, so what we're referring to was the fact that we have the accountability by tracking the guards' movements while on site. That's what we meant by customizable, that this particular agency will provide accountability by tracking the guards' movements while on site, give specific orders for making rounds and reporting incidents, and all data is logged in real time. So if you can think about a guard, they're required to walk through the facilities and actually create reports for things that are, going on, not going on, but they have to actually input that into a system that is customizable for not on my watch, High Point. So that's what that was about. It was about providing accountability for the guards that are there so that we can know the guards are doing what they're supposed to do while on site. And it's all electronic and computerized, where they have to walk through and log every single communal space, every single floor, and the activity that's going on in real time with that data. And that data is automatically generated to come to our system so that we can know what's going on in real time at our facility.
And then as a follow-up, I may have missed this, but you said that there's sort of a rough estimate of the number of folks who would be on site at any one time. Did I hear that incorrectly?
No, basically that we will have 24/7 service and three shifts with a minimum of 1 guard per shift. That's our security plan. But the CCTV monitoring will be recorded 24/7.
Okay, so I guess that's the thing that I was wondering. You said there was at minimum 1, but 24 hours, 24/7. And sometimes there will be more.
3 shifts with a minimum of 1 guard per shift. That's what our commitment is at this point.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so next is Eric, followed by Megan, Eric Diaz, Megan Joy, Heidi Schmidt, Tim Laughlin. Okay, Eric.
Hi, Rev Q. Thank you and your organization for the work you do. Just proud of even this initiative you have planned to do.
Thank you.
My question is, I hear from the residents, there's a concern about, these new sort of people that would be potentially using this service outside, crowding. What is the plan in place to address that concern regarding people maybe hanging out in the street, participants of this program? What is the plan to kind of make sure the streets are not cluttered and kind of intruding on kind of normal small businesses in the surrounding area?
I appreciate that question, Eric, and thanks for asking it. And again, we're all about the good neighbor policy. We're for us, it's not just about creating what's going on in the inside of our house, High Point, but also creating safety on the outside. So as I had mentioned earlier, we will have security that will do the foot patrol throughout our neighborhood.
I'm sorry, Ref Q. Is there also a sort of like a curfew in place of sorts or anything of that nature outside of the security?
No, we do not have a curfew that is in place, but what we do have is people that are very responsible as from our organization that will make sure that if there's any incidents that need to be reported, that they will be reported accordingly to DHS and or NYPD. And not only from our residents, but if we go outside and witness something from people that are not part of our quote unquote residents that are in that, that fall into that line of unruly or disorderly, we will do the same to report them to NYPD, whether they're our residents or not. Particularly when it comes to our residents, that's what we're able to put in place. Those that are our connection with NYPD, as well as our foot soldiers, so to speak, that are part of our security staff, and those that is our program director who is committed to do those rounds. Outside of that, obviously we are not the police, right? We are not the police, but we will do our due diligence in assuring safety, not just for the residents, not just for the neighbors, but for our residents as well, which is, I think is fair for me to say, that if there's anything that's unruly that's taking place outside of our High Point residents, that we will report that as well, and not just activities that relates to those that occupy 100 Orchard.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Eric.
Okay, next is Megan Joy, followed by Heidi Schmidt, followed by Tim Laughlin. Megan?
Sorry. Hi, Reverend Q. Thank you for your work. I mean, I honestly believe it takes very special people to do this kind of work. So it's appreciated. I'm a business owner in the neighborhood on Orchard Street, right across Delancey. And my concern is that since this pandemic started and we have outdoor seating, we've got, you know, our customer base is sort of in their 20s and 30s, and, you know, they're drinking alcohol, and, you know, now they're outside. And I'm concerned about the mix of the two, about the residents that might be seeking your help and our customers. I know that over the summer, there was a lot more drug dealing in the neighborhood. I'm concerned that drug dealers sometimes prey on the most vulnerable people, and that they'll start coming to the neighborhood when there's more homeless people in the neighborhood. So I'm concerned about that. And I'm also concerned that there's only one security guard on at a time. So when they're leaving High Point and doing their rounds, that means that there's somebody not watching High Point. So I'm worried, like, it sounds good that they're doing rounds, but you know, how long are they? I feel like their first priority would be keeping High Point safe. So they're probably not going to be out and about too much. So, you know, that doesn't give me a whole lot of peace of mind knowing that the security guards are going to do rounds. Maybe you could just talk to that a little bit.
Megan, I really do appreciate, you know, your concern, and I understand that as a, you know, as you as a business owner, but just so you know, like I think it's important for you to understand the makeup of those that are going to be in the stabilization piece of our emergency shelter. They're high functioning, you know, homeless individuals, right? We're not talking about, you know, those that are going to require, you know, the extra care that maybe some other homeless individuals may require. These are high functioning, right? And a lot of these homeless people, some of them came about as a result of COVID, right? And it's like, I need a place, and I may be homeless today, I may be in the streets today, but I just need a place. And it's not so much when you think about stabilization, you know, they are high functioning homeless individuals. So they're able, you know, and I think there's sometimes a stigma that's attached to this piece that because they're homeless, it's a different type of labeling, right? And I think we've all been guilty of that. But I just want to assure you that the people that, you know, are in our place, and I cannot, and I'm not the police, and we're not going to be the police, that we are going to do what we need to do to ensure the safety of our community and the well-being of our residents, right? By, you know, allowing them to have that safe haven, have that stabilization rather, right at 100 Orchard. You know, having that warm bed, having the support system of people that care for them, having the wherewithal to be able to have the conversation of what could my potential next steps be. We're going to do all of that within our safe haven. And so that's what I can bring confidence to, that number one, we're talking about high functioning homeless individuals.
Reverend
Right?
Q, can I just say, speak to that?
Yeah.
While the security is outside monitoring, we will have resident assistants inside monitoring the shelter. So at no time will it be unattended.
Yeah.
I think that was your question, right?
Yeah, and I think that,
And I would love to know also how far, what kind of radius their rounds are. And I don't know if that's been decided upon yet.
no, it has, what is the question again, Megan? I'm sorry.
Like when they do their walk around, when they do their rounds, as you say, like where are they going?
They're
Like how
going
far
in the immediate area. I mean, I haven't like pinpoint like what street to what street, but we're going to be doing the immediate area. I was privileged to be driven around by the NCOs from the 7th Precinct, and I got a pretty good sense of the different areas that our program director and our security should pay attention to. So we'll flush that out, you know, the closer we get to you know, opening the safe haven. But I do see that, you know, there are some areas that we do need to pay attention to, but right now we're focusing on just the immediate area.
And just to reiterate, I mean, if, you know, the whole point of this is for this to be a place where clients thrive and succeed. And, you know, we're going to be assessing people before they come in and making sure it's an appropriate placement. And if it's not, that'll be something we're following up with and engaging the client around immediately. And if it's not an appropriate place, then we're going to have to work with them to make sure it you know, they find a place that they can thrive in and succeed in. So it is something we'll be actively dealing with.
Thank you, Shane.
All right, so next is Heidi Schmidt, followed by Tim Laughlin, followed by Susan Stetzer, followed by Michael Forrester. Heidi.
Hi, everyone. I had a few questions. I'm going to rattle them off like Susan did. I wanted to know a little bit more about your site staff. So how many site staff you projecting to have according to how many people you'll have in the units? And then also what are their roles in either education or experience levels? So will there be a therapist on site? Will there be a psychologist, psychiatrist? Are there caseworkers? How many? Kind of the social work angle of that. That's my first question. Other shelters have a cab. I'm wondering if you're thinking about having a cab at your site. To tie into the first question, I wanted to know a little bit more about the mental health services on site. We talked a little bit about the common space, and it sounds like I kind of heard like, you know, there'll be games for people to play and that's kind of it, but I want to know what are the mental health services that are either available on site, or are you linking with an outside source to get people that help for, you know, the mental health services that they need, or the substance abuse treatment services they need? And then I'm a little confused too about, you know, just on background, I used to work at Department of Homeless Services. So my understanding was stabilization beds are actually the lowest threshold for people who are coming off of the street. And, you know, I also believe that we should not stigmatize homeless people, but at the same time, I understood that stabilization beds are not necessarily for people who are super high functioning, that they are very low threshold so that people will get off the street and get the help and services they need. And I just want to bring up that question because it really does depend on the services that they get, not about like who and how they behave, but the services that are available there, especially when it comes to mental health services. So those are my questions.
Thank you, Heidi.
What, you know what, Reverend, can we, yeah, let's have Shane answer first about the stabilization beds.
Okay.
And then we can talk more about specifically. Shane, could you talk a little bit about this, because I think Heidi brings up a good point, because you know who exactly is going to be here and what kind of services are going to be present.
Yeah, I mean, an emergency in a stabilization bed. Hi, Heidi. How are you? Emergency stabilization beds. I mean, they're low threshold in that, you know, there's not a lot of, there's no curfew, and there's no some of the other restrictions that they have maybe at a shelter. However, you know, that doesn't mean we're not trying to place people in the most appropriate settings again. And if somebody has a lot of needs that can't be met at this site, we will not place them at this site, and we'll place them at a site that has richer services. And in terms of the just general services, again, we're going to be still integrated with the outreach teams and all the services that they provide in terms of mental health and assessment, as well as just other partner agencies who we work with fairly consistently on the street to provide things like mental health services, substance use treatment. So while some of those services are not on site for the stabilization bed model, it doesn't mean they won't be offered and part of the way that the staff is engaging them. But again, I just want to emphasize you know, it is a tool to get people off the street quickly, but again, there really is an assessment piece, and we do want to make sure people are placed in appropriate settings with an adequate level of services that they need.
Okay. Okay, so next will be.
What about the other questions I asked?
Oh, sorry.
And how many site staff,
Well, yeah. So Heidi, so for stabilization bed, as Shane was saying, that this isn't actually a site where there's going to be normally staffed as it would a homeless shelter, right? Because this is stabilization beds, so it's obviously a much lighter staffing model. So there isn't mental health services on site per se from staffing. But Reverend Key, do you want to talk a little bit more about the kind of work you will be doing?
Yeah, so I was just going to answer that way. You know, we don't have because of the type of program we're engaging in, the stabilization piece, there is not the clinical, it's not the drug rehab, it's not that. That's not what stabilization is. So I think Shane answered that early on. So we will not be having those services on site.
Heidi, do you have anything else, or were all your questions answered?
Yep, they were. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next will be Susan Stetzer, then Tim Laughlin, Michael Forrester, Charlie Gliwa.
Okay.
Tim, right? Is it what? Tim and then Susan. I'm sorry, Susan and then.
I
forgot now.
Susan always goes in front of me. Go ahead, Susan.
Okay.
Thank you. Tim and I have a deal. We haven't worked out. I want to follow up on security, but before that, there's one question I had forgotten. Can you tell me whether, when possible, there'll be a preference for people who live in CB3 or have ties to people in Community Board 3?
Shane, do you want to talk about who's going to be at the site?
Yeah, I don't think we are obviously going to be going to all the clients in that area and the clients who are appropriate and discussing this and trying to use this as a tool. There's not going to be a specific preference. I mean, we still want to serve everybody who's appropriate for it throughout the boroughs, but absolutely there'll be a strong emphasis in that area. And you know Goddard, and they know their clients, and clients who it's an appropriate fit for, and who, you know, have not gone inside because they've not had something in the area, then absolutely those will be the clients we're going to first. Absolutely. To make sure.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to follow up on the security, because I'm glad to hear that they will be doing walkarounds. My experience, some of the biggest problems, as Megan was referring to, are drug dealers that come and prey on people in shelters of various kinds. And so therefore the outside security is really important. But our previous experience, like particularly with 3rd Street Men's Shelter and places like that, the private security are not allowed to walk around. They have to stay at the facility. So I'm wondering about the difference, how these people the security is able to walk around.
We are absolutely able to walk around, and I can assure you, Susan, that we will have a security engaged in walking around our neighborhood. to assure, safety for both those that are inside and out, and creating the reporting that's necessary to DHS or NYPD. So the answer is yes, we will have that security in addition to our program director, who is absolutely committed as a resident of our community, of your community. Oh, well, I could say our community, to walk around as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Susan.
Okay, Tim?
Hi, thanks, May. And thank you, Reverend, for the work that you're doing. I think it's truly important. I guess I have two questions. And my first one probably likely is better answered by the team from DHS. So I know in our last community conversation, where we had a community board meeting about this, we talked about a stabilization site and the transition to that potentially being a safe haven and the need for potentially construction and some other things. The meeting in January and the meeting tonight on the community board's agenda is specifically about a safe haven at 100 Orchard. And I know that in the Reverend's kind of comments and presentation, there was discussion of a stabilization, then a safe haven. And so I just really would like just to have an understanding of the DHS position here, because I think we're getting two pieces of information at two different meetings, right? Our understanding was immediate stabilization site transitioning to a safe haven in the spring. And is that not happening? Is there a change there?
Yeah, no. So I appreciate the confusion. I think that I wanted to be more clear about what we're talking about here, because the safe haven bed is not de facto, right? So in terms of opening up, the safe haven, yes. So in order stabilization beds, we can open up as a city without any kind of review, just because of the emergency need of it. For a safe haven, I can't say that for 100% sure that we will be opening up the safe haven. That's what our intention is, but we have to go through a process that includes a fair share and environmental impact statement in order to be able to do that. And if there are parts of that process where, for whatever reason, it appears that we can't open up a safe haven, then we wouldn't do it. So I didn't want to be as presumptuous as to say this is the thing that's going to happen. I wanted to just clarify this is the city's intention. This is what we'd like to see happen. But I think it's important to be just very clear with our words that that's not something that is. I'm saying that this is happening spring, full stop, right? This is what our intention is. We'll go through the appropriate plan. We can certainly have another meeting about that when it comes to safe haven in terms of the project. This is an unusual situation just because we are in such a dire need of beds that we are forced the situation to open this up as stabilization bed rather than what our normal process would be when it came to being a safe haven.
Got it. And then, Susan, May, I would just say that, I really wish we would have had some more clarity on that agenda item, just so that members of the community could have really understood what we're discussing, because I don't think that was clarified at our last meeting. And so perhaps moving forward, we can just really reconfirm about those things so that people know what we're talking about. I guess my second question is just related to security. As I'm sure some of you are aware, we had an unfortunate shooting incident just a few days ago on Delancey Street at the Holiday Inn, which is another emergency facility operated by DHS. And so I guess I'm just really trying to understand that security piece of the puzzle too. Is that an observe and report function? We have challenges, particularly on the block where this proposed facility is located, with police being able to respond to the significant nighttime activity that's already there, right? So we're having residents complain about noise. We're having residents complain about people on the street. We're having, continual issues in managing crowds and managing street activity. And, before we had the introduction of another potential need for police intervention, the police response wasn't there. So I guess I'm just trying to understand, is the security team that is being provided here really relying on the police department to intervene when there is an incident of concern, or is it, I guess I'm just trying to figure that out from a police response perspective, because as it is now, we're the smallest precinct in the city, and we don't have a lot of officers. And I give credit to our community affairs officers. I know them well. I am that sector's community partner, but we don't have the resources that other precincts do, and so I just want to understand that a little more.
Oh, did you? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. So I'm not. situations that happen are unfortunate, when it comes to shooting, etc. But I do want to say just very clearly that we are not operating as NYPD or police, that we are like working in partnership with NYPD, in partnership with DHS, and we are not going to serve as, the police for the neighborhood. But what we will do is make sure that when we do our patrolling in in the neighborhood, that if there are any incidences that we can see that can be not even that's just happening, but could be potential blowups, that we will report them to DHS and/or NYPD, whatever entity seems appropriate at the time. DHS obviously would be like, if we see additional homeless people on the streets, we are going to report that to DHS. If we see that there's brawling happening, even if it's not with our own residents, we will report that. However, I want to make sure that everyone is very clear that we are not NYPD, but we will do our part as good neighbors and as part of the community to assure what safety could look like based on our response to what we see.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Tim.
Yeah. Oh, Tim, about today's, were you speaking about today's agenda item when you said you wish that we had been more clear about what today's, or you speaking in general?
Look, I'll be honest. I think that you were clear in my understanding that that's what we were talking about tonight. And I guess I was anticipating we were having a conversation about a safe haven, and that's what the agenda had said, and that's what had been, I was told. And so I'm assuming that's what the community board was told, but it just, it didn't have the mention of stabilization and not safe haven. So I was confused there. And that's why.
Okay, well,
we were confused.
We were confused too. So no need to feel.
Not saying.
And we were seeing the slideshow for the first time as well.
I'm with you. I'm just bringing it up as.
It's PowerPoint. It is in the PowerPoint. The details.
I'm just going to say that, this is one of many conversations we're going to have. This is, we're about relationship building. We're about making sure we answer your questions, Tim. We're making sure we answer your questions, Susan, and the different ones that posed it. And so that you can see where we come from, what we're doing. And we want to work this together. It's about, how do we create a community that's, working together. And that's what we're here for. So just so that we're having this conversation today, it's not our last conversation. We are here. We are here. We are here to make sure that your questions are answered and that we work together and that we provide, that the whole good neighbor piece that you're so desire. So it's not just about this one-time conversation. And even if the agenda wasn't exactly what everybody anticipated, know that this is not our last conversation. Matter of fact, this is our beginning conversation, because while you're looking to know more about who we are, we want to know about who you are and what your concerns are. And to be able to find ourselves a part of the fabric of the entire community. So that really is our desire. And however we get to accomplish that, that's what's important to us.
I'm sorry, I need to ask that, I sent the agenda to you, and I tried very hard to make our agenda very specific and very accurate. So I was also surprised that it changed, and I would ask in the future that you work with us to make sure that we're on the same page to be very accurate. Just for the future.
And if there was anything on our part that created any confusion, let me be the first to say I apologize, and that I will make sure that we do our part moving forward in making sure that everybody that's part of CB3 is satisfied with, with our what our agenda items are. And so again, we apologize on that.
May, if I just could, thank you, Reverend. I appreciate that. Please know that I as someone who has to deal with agenda items on Community Board 3 all the time, I get it. And I think I'm just raising that point because This to me is not about a facility in our community. This is about some concerns specifically with this location and that siting, and just making sure that, you know, we are informing the community in the appropriate ways, and they are having the information so that they can provide feedback. Because I do think that, you know, should this become a safe haven and should those pieces move forward, there's an environmental analysis. There are real things that we need to discuss about the suitability of this facility at this location. And that's the only reason I bring it up. But I thank you. And I just want to make sure you know that that's where I was coming from, just a process perspective.
I totally appreciate it. And I totally heard where you were coming from. And we will definitely consider that moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah, so at some point, I'm not familiar with the timeline. Maybe there's a standard timeline because I'm not in this particular line of work in terms of social services. Matt talked about a regulatory requirement. So if you don't know now, we don't have to answer the question now, but it would be good to know the timeline, you know,
Sure.
for everything. So I don't know if it's easily explained now or we can get a subsequent.
The site, in terms of the site opening for the stabilization bed, is your question, Maylee?
No, it's when the timeline for a safe haven. The timeline would look like for a safe haven. So that for the purposes of a safe haven, you know, again, right now we're talking about the stabilization beds, which are going to be for 46. The proposed safe haven, which would be, which would be the city's intention to open at some point later in the year. That would be for 80 beds. Of course, that's, you know, COVID notwithstanding, but ultimately that would be the goal. And in order to be able to do that, before we can open up a safe haven, we have to go through a series of steps before any that actually official designation could happen. And there'd have to be, you know, we'd have to work with Not On My Watch to figure out the appropriate staffing. And in addition to that, we'd also have to, you know, do a couple of different parts of our process, which would include doing an environmental assessment statement and also a fair share analysis. And if both of those documents prove to be that would be acceptable, then we could think about being able to move forward on that site. But those steps have to be taken first before that could happen. So I'm not trying to confuse anyone. It's just this is a little bit of an unusual situation, just given what our dire need is, which is why we are opening this up first as a stabilization bed, just so we can get people in off the street that really need it. Because ultimately, we're talking about folks in, you know, it's a winter time, it's snow. I mean, this is the time of the year when you can imagine people really need to have safety and comfort.
Right. I mean, we said in our district needs statement, we need safe haven, so we don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
So there are certain things that need to be done. So are you saying that, and people here are expressing they would like to come back to talk about the safe haven part, because that is the intention, right? So, but
yes,
there are things that have to be done. So that's why you're not promising a safe haven.
Right.
So when would that be?
I mean,
like sometime this year or next year?
And our purpose, yes. I mean, listen, our purpose, you know, for the purposes of this meeting, I think that we just really wanted to focus on answering questions for the immediate need, because we are planning on opening this as stabilization beds. We wanted to make sure that people's immediate needs or concerns are that. And then, of course, we're happy to come back at a later date after we've had further conversations and talking about the safe haven. But I think it'll be helpful for everyone after we open up after this opens the stabilization beds. I think that would also help provide some context for the conversation as moving forward, and it would sort of demonstrate also Not On My Watch would actually have some time in the community to show the work that they do, and hopefully to alleviate some of the concerns that have been addressed. And I think it would help to have a richer conversation at that point.
In general, I'm not talking about this particular. Is it conditional upon the performance or with the stabilization bed?
No, I wouldn't say.
I mean, they're performing. I mean, I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
I mean, as an agency, we want to have providers that do good work. So we're confident in the work that Not On My Watch is going to do. And I think in terms of for this conversation, it seems to make sense that we'd want to be able to have Not On My Watch operate in this particular fashion. And then when we have conversations later, I think once there's trust that's built up, it would also just be helpful for that conversation because I think it would look differently.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so there are still many people with questions in the queue. And the next one will be Michael Forrester, followed by Charlie Gliwa, followed by Sandra Strother, followed by Mark Miller.
Okay, thank you, May. I actually have a question for Reverend Q and then also a question for Matt. I just want to start off by reiterating what a lot of people have said. I don't think anybody here would dispute, the need and the great work that you guys are doing. And clearly this is not a meeting as a referendum on homeless shelters, but this is a referendum on citing this shelter in this particular location. And now we're into the second community board meeting, and there's still very, very little specific information about this site. And we're also hearing a lot of different information. On the one hand, you're trying to bifurcate this stabilization versus safe haven, but the city's own admission at the last community board meeting, I think the quote was, once these shelters open, they tend to stay open. We also have Reverend Q, who has now mentioned many times that this is going to be converted to a safe haven. You've mentioned that you're going to continue this conversation with the community and make sure that you address all of our concerns, but yet the city is trying to open up a stabilization site without really addressing any of these concerns. Specifically, when it comes to the site, Reverend Q, you mentioned things like intake, outreach, housekeeping, COVID staff, food, security, food service, leisure activities, movie nights, classes, a holding room for COVID patients, isolation rooms, and somebody else mentioned 2 community rooms. I know this building. These rooms don't exist. The certificate of occupancy for this building allows for 30 people on the ground floor. We've now heard from the city everything from 70 beds of men to 46 beds of adult men and women, possibly couples, without any mention of whether there'd be children and where children would be taken care of. Then it was, once we go to a safe haven, it's going to be 70, then it's going to be 80. Matt just mentioned 80. We're all over the place here. So my first question is to Reverend Q. How are you going to address the fact that there's one common space that allows for 30 people? Do you have any floor plans that you guys have laid out for the space and the building? The building right now has 22 hotel rooms. If you're going to eventually put 80 people in 22 rooms, I'm not good at math, but that's over 4 people per room. In addition, this particular location is in the center of an active nightlife area that some have referred to as Bourbon Street in New Orleans. So my question for the Reverend is, number one, how will you address the common space constraints? Number two, are you really aware of what nightlife looks like in this neighborhood prior to COVID and during COVID and during open streets? And then lastly, where are the other shelters that your organization currently has open and operating? I'm a little confused whether, the organization has individuals with 20 years experience or whether this organization itself has operated facilities and has the experience. And then if you don't mind, May, after she answers, if I could ask Matt one question.
So the two are inseparable, whether you have an organization or you have a people that in the organization that have it. If my organization have people within it that has 20+ year experiences, the organization people have 20+ year experiences. Those people that are going to be spearheading it, that to me is inseparable. Those are my team people. There are not on my watch team members that have those experiences operating 3 DHS shelters. When we talk about the actual how many people, the number of people pre-COVID, post-COVID, during COVID, all of that changes evidently. And if you look at the COB, it does allow for more than what you're talking about.
No, it doesn't. The certificate of the certificate of occupancy for the ground floor is 30 people. That's it.
Ground floor, right? So we have 8 floors in the building, right? And so what we have done, and we've done it pretty deliberately in consideration of COVID, obviously with the 6-foot square, how many people we can get in the room, along with the communal space that's being built out. How we're going to lay out the entire communal space where everything is going to be, that is privy to our NYPD, who is going to have the oversight of that build. They're the ones that need to know what's going to be in every single room. We're being pretty cautious about that. But when I tell you that we have done, in conjunction with the city and state agency, what would be allowed, it is not a number that was determined by us people, us just walking through the building. It was a number.
And Reverend Q, let me just interject 1 second. Michael, I just want to apologize. It's the maximum is 70. I'm sorry, I misspoke when I said 80. It's I didn't introduce the new number. It's maximum is 70.
Yeah,
that was just I just misspoke.
And those numbers came, and we did a walkthrough with ODDI, which is a state agency. And so when we think about those numbers now in the midst of COVID, what I said earlier and what everyone else has said as part of DHS was, we're going to be in stabilization, looking at 46 and building it slowly. And so those numbers would be appropriate based on measurements and based on what has been determined through the walkthrough. So 46 is a real number for stabilization. And when we think of post-COVID, moving past that, which we will, that's not part of this conversation, but we will be looking like what Matt was talking about, closer to 70. The last issue that you had brought up, not relating to this, the numbers, but also as relates to the communal space, we are going to have a communal space for our residents that will be on a rotating basis, that is taken into consideration. As I said earlier, we're very, very serious about our CDC protocol, et cetera, as relates to COVID. So the communal space occupancy will be based on what CDC will allow, even if that means there will be residents that will be rotating through those communal spaces that is part of our orchard, 100 Orchard.
So as a follow-up, Reverend, one of the things you mentioned was that these individuals would be high functioning, but at the last community board meeting, I believe it was Shane or Matt said that stabilization beds actually are intended for the most vulnerable. And so I'm kind of curious, is it high functioning or is it most vulnerable?
Sorry, I think I was probably speaking more to safe haven. I mean, safe havens historically have been for the most vulnerable clients in the street. Stabilization beds are a little bit of a different dynamic.
So when you convert to a safe haven, do you kick out all the high functioning people?
No, no one will be kicked out.
No, we won't kick anybody out. It'll be a slow ramp up to a safe haven at that point, but no.
So Reverend, what about nightlife? I mean, aren't you concerned? I mean, have you been down there at night? I mean, I'm being honest. I'm not trying to attack. I'm just being honest. Like, have you gone down there at 1 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday in the summer? I mean, have you seen what goes on that block?
I think I'd like to kind of jump in here. You know, there are several different locations as it relates to safe haven locations, shelter locations throughout the city of New York. And I can point to a few that I'm thinking of in East Harlem and Central Harlem, where, you know, the foot traffic is pretty busy, especially at night. And I think what we always want to look for are high quality providers who will, make the commitment to ensure that they're putting eyes outside of the site, observing, doing perimeter checks, and what this Not on My Watch has made the commitment to do. You want to make sure that this is a provider that's going to be responsive in real time, especially if there's community complaints or calls, should it involve or relate to our clients. And so I think the fact that they're going to be lending themselves externally outside of the site, with their perimeter rounds and checks, I think that will help to alleviate any complaints or issues of loitering. Also would help to ensure that we're monitoring, our clients' engagements outside of the location. And where we have these types of practices in place in other locations that are just as busy as this location, we've seen some success. That's not to say that there won't ever be, I understand that there's already ongoing issues in this community district, in this particular street, in this particular block, which is why Reverend Q, I think, did a smart thing and proactively connected with the local NCOs. They did a walkthrough. They're going to continue to partner with one another to ensure that they're monitoring, this particularly highly trafficked spot more closely. But I just want to say that this is not anything that's, unique to us, where we've cited sites and as it relates to locations that are highly trafficked and has a lot, going on. We cited a safe haven and community board. Is that Community Board 2 on 14th Street? Is a pretty busy, high trafficked area, lots of restaurants, lots of bars in that area. So, we put similar best practices in place there. So I just want to preference that this isn't anything that is new to the agency as it relates to, what do we do? What do we put in place? What types of proactive measurements do we put in place to ensure that we're doing our very best to put eyes outside of this site and monitoring? So
I understand. I understand. So I know I've been using a lot of time, so I want to move on to my question to Matt. So, in this context, I think obviously coming to the community and hearing our concerns and doing this analysis, and like Matt, you have mentioned, a safe haven is a process that presumably starts to address all of these issues and really to determine whether the site is appropriate for that location. I'm kind of curious as to why a stabilization site, when, in your own words, when these things open, they don't tend to close. The impact to the community is going to be the same, whether the city calls it a stabilization site or a safe haven. The impact and the problems that have been raised are going to be there, dealing with the facility size, dealing with the nightlife, all these things we've mentioned. I'm kind of curious as to why you don't have to go through that process for a stabilization site, and to say that COVID has created this emergency, might be true, but it doesn't change the fact that doesn't the community deserve a process before you just go and open up a site? And in terms of when you're opening, it's been reported, I think yesterday in the newspaper, that you're looking to open up in a week. So Matt, if you could address, why you think the city doesn't have to go through this process now before the stabilization site is open, and do you intend to open next week without any more community input?
Well, we certainly intend to open. I don't know if we're going to be opening next week. I think we're going to be opening by, believe the middle of February. That's my understanding. In terms of why we don't need to, receive permission to open up an emergency stabilization beds, frankly, because it's an emergency. So because it's an emergency and because we're dealing with the situation, we have.
Well, what's the emergency? What's the emergency now that wasn't going on a couple months ago?
It's been COVID. It's the same. It's the same. It's the same emergency.
But the homeless emergency you're saying was caused by COVID?
We're saying that the particular situation has been exacerbated for street homeless people because of COVID, and it's been an emergency. Yes, because folks that normally would stay on the subway, folks that normally would stay in 24-hour restaurants, those types of places which are now closed, has just created a need. And so I hear your concerns, what you're saying. You don't want to have this. You don't want to have this place open up You don't want to have a deleterious impact on the community or things around you. I've also heard from other folks, which I also appreciate, that they're concerned of, locating this site where it is, right, in relation to a lot of things that are happening and what kind of mix that could be. And so what we're saying tonight is that the idea of what this site offers for people and what this site can provide for individuals that are really in need of a place to stay for their own safety and for their own physical safety, and obviously for their own, emotional safety, is greater than those concerns are. And again, as we move forward, we're not disappearing, right? This isn't something where we're coming to Community Board 3 and then that's the, and the agency is never going to be represented here again, or not on my watch is going anywhere. And so I understand there's a lot of apprehension, trepidation. Doing this work, I've seen that same kind of concern across the city, and it's not by people that are NIMBY, and it's not by people that are callous. It's by New Yorkers who have genuine concerns about their neighborhood and don't know what this new thing is going to do that's going to have an impact on it. And even though I've been able and fortunate to see that, that stabilization beds have very low impact in neighborhoods, and just in general, and really it's just folks that are just trying to get by and survive. I know that there's nothing that I can say at this moment that's going to alleviate those concerns. And so all we can say is, we're really looking forward to working on this site. We're looking forward to gaining your trust, and obviously, and seeing as this moves forward in a very slow and methodical way. We're not going to be 46 people overnight, or anything like that. We really are hearing what people are saying, and we want to obviously figure out how to, hold both things in our hands at the same time, which is the needs and concerns of the community, and the needs and concerns of street homeless New Yorkers that desperately need a place to stay. And so I don't know if there's any answer I'm going to give you.
I'm sorry.
Michael, I don't know
Okay,
if there's any answer I'm going to give you that's going to be satisfactory other than that.
Okay, we really need to move on. Next is Charlie. Charlie Klewa, are you there?
So I first also just want to say I do appreciate the work you guys are doing. I do understand the need for safe havens in the neighborhood. I kind of, I guess, have a statement instead of a question here.
Okay, I'm sorry. Could you turn it into a question?
Yeah.
It would be a lot more helpful.
Yep. I do have a question then. So I guess my biggest worry, along with many others, is the nightlife going on Orchard Street and the surrounding blocks. I've lived at three different addresses on this direct block, 96, 92, and 94 Orchard Street. I know better than most people how busy the street gets, how loud it gets, how crowded it gets. As Michael said and others said, it's similar to Bourbon Street, New Orleans. Bars and restaurants in the neighborhoods employ 6, 7, 8 security guards outside just to control those crowds. I don't understand how one security guard is mitigates any risk that the nightlife brings to this shelter. I think adding the shelter on this block is a massive mistake, and is extremely worrisome to me. I'm just really, curious how you're going to deal with the security late night. Are you going to bulk up on certain nights? Are you going to have more than one? And I'd also just like to add a point onto Tim's that I had a problem 3 to 4 times in this neighborhood with
I'm sorry. Could you ask a question, please?
Yeah, I'm getting to it. I had an issue in the neighborhood. I called the cops at least 3 or 4 times this summer, having issues being threatened by individuals. I called the police and they never responded because they were so busy with other things. So I'm just really curious how you're going to deal with the security issue regarding nightlife at this location.
Well, before Leilani had spoke to it a little bit, but is there something more you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious.
I'm talking to I'm not talking the team at DHS. Is there something you want to add to what Leilani had mentioned?
I hear that this area is extremely a unique there's a unique situation here. I know I spoke with Susan at greater lengths about the college students. It's a pretty youthful group of individuals here, given the makeup of the community. I understand that your community district looks very different than others as it relates to the nightlife in this area. I don't have anything additional to add other than, not on my watch and the agency's commitment to making sure that we're really doing a good job and putting eyes outside of what's happening in this area. And so just to kind of walk through what it means when we say there'll be perimeter checks. Staff will be going outside of the shelter site, of the stabilization bed site. That means that they will be doing canvassing and around the block. What happens oftentimes if community members put locations on our radar, to not on my watch or DHS, sometimes staff lend themselves to go a little, maybe a block or two further just to ensure that we're putting eyes to those new hotspot locations that are flagged to us. And so we really do count on the community and the community board to let us know about those locations if folks see our clients lingering somewhere. But that's the type of commitment you have from Not on My Watch. And in places, what I was speaking to where we are doing this, we hear less community complaints. And it also helps staff. It helps our staff, understand, the areas of where our clients are. I know that Not on My Watch is looking to, pass out their business cards to the local businesses, making sure folks have their contact information. That's important. So I think what I'm trying to speak to is the community engagement component with any site that's coming to any district. That's very crucial and important to the success of the program as we try to integrate ourselves as your new neighbors, as well as to ensure that our new neighbors understand who to call, who to contact, who to reach out to in real time, should there ever be any complaints or issues or concerns in community. We're not going into this space hoping that there's going to be an issue. I think I hear what you're saying. There's already a condition here, but I think that it goes a little beyond the scope, as we're not, an enforcement agency. This is where partnership matters, especially with the precincts. And so that conversation with the precinct is happening, that commitment and coordination. And something that we can do, Not on My Watch, is do maybe possibly coordinated perimeter checks with the precinct if they're open to do that. We do that at other locations, but I don't recommend to do that. We're not trying to, police the block, but I know that PD did express that they're already in the area, they're increasing their beat here, but there will be a close communication happening should we need to have PD's involvement. But that's not what we're hoping for. But you have the commitment of Not on My Watch to be putting eyes outside of the site. And Charlie, that we're doing this in other areas, and we do see some success with that type of best practice be put in place. I hope that answers your question.
And I just wanted to, possibility belaboring, just reiterate, I mean, we're really interested in the success of the client inside and outside the building. And again, if there were concerns around a client not being able to thrive there or make it there, or they're too susceptible to influences or whatever the case is, then this probably wouldn't be the appropriate site for them. But, if there are issues outside the building, that will be things that the case managers and the teams and everybody works with the client around. So it's not as if once they're out the door, that's it. And inside and outside are really integrated, and we're looking at the whole person and really trying to help them succeed and move on. And being a good neighbor is part of it. And so just, it is something we'll be absolutely mindful of and attentive to and responsive to. And it's going to be something that's part of the work of the building. Again, they see themselves as part of the community and integrated with the community in the neighborhood. So it's going to, working to make sure everything on each aspect of it is helpful for the client and you and the businesses and the neighbors.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry,
Layla.
just one last important detail, if I may. At every
Sure.
site, whenever there's a client that onboards, there's always a sit down that happens with that individual. They get a welcome package. In that welcome package, there's conversations and dialogues about the dynamic of the community. And what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what won't be tolerated, and those types of conversations happen for every individual that onboards at any site managed and operated with the provider.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now I am we've had a lot of questions. We still have more. So I'm only going to take questions on topics that were not discussed. But first of all, Susan, did you say it was important to clarify something about the emergency?
Well, I was going to wait till afterward, but I'll say it now. I wish that this was in a better location, but I have to talk about the emergency of homeless people on the street. This is something as Tim and others know, I'm working on every day. It is an emergency. Since COVID, I don't know if it's because people have lost their jobs, they've lost their homes. There are many, many, many more people on the streets. They do need beds off the streets. People that are not eligible for safe havens or not yet eligible can use stabilization beds. It really is necessary to get as many stabilization beds as we can, because it is better to have people in beds than sleeping on the streets. And it's a very sad situation.
Okay.
That's Susan.
Thank you. Okay, remember now, I only take questions if it's a topic that hasn't been covered. If it's been covered, you're not going to get to ask it. Okay, so Sandra, then Mark, then Ricky.
Okay. Hi, I waited a really long time, but I want to say thank you to Leanne. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, because after all the things I heard tonight, I didn't hear about the engagement with the actual residents. My concern is I am the president of 3 tower buildings across the street from where the Holiday Inn is. And where there are concerns about nightlife, there are also concerns about day life. My question is, are the residents required to leave the facility every day? Because as Susan said earlier, not only are they predators for them to buy drugs, but for them to sell drugs, but they're also seeking drugs, and they're seeking places to use drugs. So it is very important that you do expound upon it to them and press upon them that they will be prosecuted if they, trespass. Because I have that frequently here at Grand Street. So,
Sandra, I want to say thank you for your question, and I definitely would love to meet you outside of this Zoom call and just talk about more about the work that you're doing with your residents. But the answer is no. There is no set time where they have to leave the facility. But I do want to definitely.
Yeah, the point is for the building to be a comfortable, stable place to help them, come in off the street and get, do the work they need to do to move on to permanent housing and to stabilize and be comfortable and supported. And so, yeah, they are not at all required to leave.
Okay, I really would like your contact information. Absolutely. Because if something arises, I also am a member of CB3, so it won't be hard to reach me.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Sandra.
Okay, next is Mark Miller, then Ricky Wong, then David Crane.
Yes, I was just curious, the name of the program director.
We'll release that after we actually open up. So we're not going to do that tonight.
Okay. How about the name of the security company? That's going to be, the security seems to be a big concern. I'm just curious who you guys contracted, just out of curiosity.
Shane, is it necessary to divulge tonight, or do we do that later? I don't know. We're not open yet, so I don't understand that.
Well,
why
you're going to be opening in like a week, I think, no, or so. I'm just curious because
when we open up, we're going to give the name of the security company, the direct contact of the person, We're going to give the name of our, obviously you'll have the landline information, our chief program officer, as well as our program director. I think right now, and I'm not trying to be rude or disrespectful to anyone, I would like to wait till we open up and let the direct contact be with the email that we provided, which is Deb, our chief program officer, deb@nomwi.org. Once we open up, I will have no problem sharing all of the information. Right now, I feel more comfortable in just sharing our contact until we are fully opened up as
I
a.
see. So you've hired the people already, but you'll release it later.
I'm sorry, say it again.
You've hired the people already, but you'll release the information
We'll
later.
release it later, yes, sir.
Okay. Well, one other question's more geared towards Matt. When the organization's ready to shift from stabilization to safe haven, will you have another one of these meetings with the community?
Yeah.
Okay, that was already covered.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure so the community will be
Absolutely, Mark. Absolutely. In all fairness, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Mark.
Okay, Ricky Wong, David Crane.
Hi, just curious, I guess the lack of mental health services, is that because that would change the nature of the way you guys operate because it's considered a clinical service, or is that something else?
Jane, do you want to talk about that? It's just in terms of what the programs are, what stabilization beds look like.
Yeah, it's just really about the model. Stabilization beds are different. Again, it's low threshold. We're trying to get people quickly off the street, but they're a little bit different than a safe haven. A safe haven has a higher level of services and is for kind of a different population and operates in a slightly different way. So that's why stabilization bed is really to get people off the street. We're ready to come off the street right now in a fairly quick fashion. So it's just a different models. Really what it is, and they'll be, and again, the placements are going to be attuned to that, and that's part of the conversation with the clients and with the site and who's placed, and that factors in.
Okay, thanks.
Right, David Crane, and then.
So I was also going to
Jackie
ask
Wong.
if I was going to ask if I had heard correctly that there will be no staff that is geared for mental health on site. Now I heard that confirmed, so I'm just going to say that I think that's shocking and a bad idea. I think that COVID has created some really dark times for people, especially people who are very vulnerable, really dark times. And I think that the community and the community board need to advocate for there being suitable mental health services at this site. Coming off the street during the time of COVID into this location with no mental services does not sound like a recipe for good outcomes for those residents.
David, when I tell you that I embrace what your last statement was regarding mental health services, and that's like across the board. I mean, me as my husband and I are also, the other hat of, doing the shelter. We're also pastors, and knowing just the mental health state of just people, just every day that has to deal with pandemic, and our children who are in schools that are in their own space dealing with some mental health challenges. And my daughter, who's a founding principal of a school, who's going through it as well. And then my organization that deals with those that have been subjected to trafficking or domestic violence, and how the increase of domestic violence has taken place. And because of the fact they're trapped, quote unquote, in a home and not having that outlet, and some of these victims being re-traumatized as a result. Our organization is heavy on trauma-informed care. The model that we're engaging it, and at the present moment of the stabilization bed, emergency housing, that would lend us to be able to refer our clients and our residents to mental health care providers. But when I say to you right now, David, that I understand what you're saying because of who I deal with from a day-to-day basis, and even some of my clients that have been re-triggered from being in a home confined environment. So I understand the dynamics of the trauma piece and the need for the intense care. No one knows it. I'm not gonna say no one knows it, but I equally know it as much as anybody on this call, and even in my own personal upbringing. And so for me, that trauma-informed care is very important. While we're not able to offer the services directly on site, I assure you that every person that walks through that door that is taken, after the intake process and meets with our case manager and meets with our program director, they will have access. Maybe not right there on site because of, the type of program that's employed through stabilization. They will have access to mental health care. And I'm an advocate of that. I have trained even in our own house of worship, just so as a backdrop to who you're dealing with as an organization. I have like almost close to 30% of our house of worship have gone through mental health training. So that is something that is extremely important to me. And I'm saying it's not just important for those that are going into our shelter, but I think we can honestly say that we just all need it as a city dealing with this pandemic. But to your point, thank you for bringing that up. And I want to assure you that they will have the care that they need in this space.
Okay, I have no doubt that your heart is in the right place, and that was 90% of your answer. I didn't doubt that to begin with.
They're going to be connected.
A referral is not enough. A referral to mental health services is not going to be something that most of these people are going to be able to follow up on. And I understand this is a resource constraint for your organization. I believe that the city just needs to step up and find a way to fund it so that this can happen. But I believe it is important that it be on site for these residents. Thank you.
Well, we transition, David, into what we hope to be the safe haven model. There will be on site. Stabilization, which is a short-term emergency, will not have it on site. That's what I'm saying. So the on site, instead of us being able to have it on site, we will have direct referral and a direct referral for those that are our residents, those that need the mental health care. For those that need the mental health care, which would probably be majority that walk through the doors. But because there is a specific model, stabilization, right? That's emergency shelter. It does not afford us the luxury of having on-site mental health care because it is emergency and it is short-term with the goal of, taking care of those needs, but also looking at moving them into independent living.
Okay. Okay, so I'm taking one more question, and that will be Jackie Wong.
Thank you, May. David Crane just asked every question I wanted to ask, so I'm going to be very quick. I also have such a strong concern about mental health service not in place or not available the way we want it. I mean, if the community must have this shelter, then I want it to be successful. So I don't have any more questions. Just a little comment. Thank you.
I appreciate that comment. And just so you know, even on our staff, we have a behavioral mental health specialist. So that person is part of my staff outside of the stabilization piece. Thank you.
I mean, many shelter are not successful is because of the lack of mental health service. So if this community must have it, then we want to get it done correctly. That's what I
totally agree. Thank you so much for your comment.
Okay, we'll have one more question from Larissa, the Zoom facilitator. She wasn't able to raise her hand, and I didn't realize she wanted to ask a question. Okay.
Okay, raising my hand. Hi, first of all, thank you for coming and presenting, giving us this information. My question was going back to what Heidi asked. I didn't hear an answer to this. Would you be open to having a CAB at your location, the community advisory boards? This goes a long way in creating a way for the community to interact with you and to address issues that come up.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't have cabs for stabilization bed facilities, but I think that we could create, if there's a need to have check-ins we can certainly hoping to do that. Now my watch has obviously been very open to trying to figure out how to coordinate and talk to people. So I think we could totally commit to something like that.
Thank you so much for that recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So this ends this particular agenda item. What we're going to do is, I think there were a lot of questions. They were answered. I think there needs to be more details on some of the questions. I don't know what they are, but we will review the meeting and make a list that we will bring back to you. And then also at some point, you do need to come back. You're opening like in a couple of weeks, right? A week or a couple of weeks.
I believe the 15th.
Oh yeah, that's practically next week.
A couple of weeks.
Yeah, practically next week, I said, but it is a couple of weeks. Okay,
I'll
so that
I'll be notifying the community board when the folks will start to move in. You'll get the notification from me.
Okay, and then it looks like sometime later we will need, when we start getting and going the safe haven, whatever those steps are. Well, there'll need to be more meetings.
We're here.
Always more meetings.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for coming.
No, thank you so much for having us. And as I said, that we are going to definitely stay involved, and we want to be able to answer any other outstanding questions that you may have. We're committed to community engagement, and looking forward to the next time we have a chat. And until then, stay safe.
Okay,
you too. Safe.
Thank you.
Be well.
Bye-bye.
Good wishes.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Oh boy. Okay, so it's 8:44, but we are going to move on to our next agenda item, which is planning for a parent resource fair with the CEC1. That's the Community Education Council, School District 1. Naomi, the president of the council, is here. Yes, you are here, Naomi?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, so I think you've had should I review the background information and why we want? No, this is a continuation of that conversation we had before shutdown.
Pre-COVID.
Yeah, remember?
Yeah, pre-COVID.
Right, so it's needed more than ever, but here we are, at some of our meetings, we talked about all sorts of things like learning loss and everything, about students with IEPs. I think our conversation was about having a parent resource fair for students with IEPs or disabilities.
Yeah, I think it was centered around like a resource fair for students, not just with IEPs, but just, students with disabilities in general.
Right.
And there was some focus on creating some workshops around D75 and, basic like IEP navigating and services and all that.
So we were gonna
does.
So we were gonna have like a little some speakers at the school, and then bring in some information tables. And it was gonna be in the building. Okay.
Right.
So we so we want to revisit it. And I know that Shirley here?
Yes, I'm here.
We had talked about it a lot, about all these issues. We did have the speakers, from D75. This was a citywide council on D75 and the citywide council on special education here.
Yeah.
And it was one of the things we talked about doing was having a resource fair, among other things. So we're here to continue the conversation, talking about, are we still having it? How, when, where, what format is it needed? I mean, we feel I think there's a need, but are there many resource fairs happening already? And obviously we need to plan. We can't plan for in-person because we don't even know when that is. So we should just plan for whatever.
Yeah, this will have to be a virtual aspect to it. Are there resource fairs happening? Not really. I think what's more happening is more like workshop-like discussions. So maybe if we want to have a workshop around students with disabilities and then target, have a couple of speakers covering for each topic, you know, maybe create, I don't want to say breakout rooms because I think all this information is pertinent anyway, but maybe if, you know, we could do we could do breakout rooms if you choose to, if you want to have more than one speaker, or, you know, we can just tailor it to, you know, one or two very specific topics and break up that time along the way. And the way I've seen this happen is in between, you can have orgs give them 5 minutes and give like a 5-minute elevator speech on what they can help and what they can provide with their contact information. So that way, you know, people are getting something out of it besides just a conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Larissa, you are right. Councilwoman Chin would like to
Chin.
support.
Yeah, great.
Gigi says.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I can just speak for a minute, I think the most important thing right now to think about when we're thinking about our students, you know, now and going back to school, one is somehow addressing the social emotional issue that we're going to face or that we are facing with students. And then, you know, maybe it's navigating the IEP process, or maybe it's just navigating, you know, sort of, you know, what we're going to encounter going back to school and what are the supports in place. So maybe we invite somebody like NAMI, you know, we invite advocates for children, we invite speakers from those organizations that could actually help parents and caregivers to navigate what is in front of them now and for next year. I guess so it would be my 2 suggestions for what we might want to focus on.
Tati, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, I agree. I think that there is, like, we do need to shift based on, you know, the times that we're in right now, and we shouldn't be planning the same event that we were planning, you know, for March. Obviously, it's going to be different no matter what. And I think something that we heard from the D75 reps were, you know, the issues about COVID testing as well in schools. I guess I'm curious from Naomi, what you would say would be, I don't know, would be like a hyper specific topic that you think, you know, needs the attention, because there might not be that many resource fairs, but I know there's just such a, you know, there's so much information out there, and I want to make sure we're, you know, doing something that is going to be the most useful to the extended community.
Yeah, I think the resource fair will have to be expanded on the resources, honestly. I think the biggest needs that I'm seeing amongst our families is food insecurity, is housing, is job loss, and even, you know, the trauma of COVID on our communities, because they have been the most impacted in communities of color. So these are all sort of traumas upon traumas that have been impacting our students, and particularly our students of color that have also, you know, I always say, like, the learning loss that's happening, quote unquote, now isn't something that is unique. You know, students have been learning at their pace for however long they've been learning. I think it's just highlighted now that they're home, sort of how they learn to families. And that is where sort of the angst are coming from. And I think, you know, everyone's in the same position. It's not like it's just your child or my child experiencing this. This is literally a global experience that the entire generation is experiencing at once. And I think addressing that, we would need to address that, because this is our children's generational 9/11. And it's going to leave a lasting impact on them. Even as adults, I think we're going to just navigate life differently after this. So I think we have to broaden what that resource is going to look like. We're going to have to bring all our CBOs that do provide these services as part of the conversation, because what our families needs now are much more heightened since pre-pandemic. I mean, they were always there, but now the increase is so much so that even families that normally were not struggling are currently struggling now.
Yes, I just want to ask a question. So, this is on Zoom, it's not in person. And do we think then, therefore, because it is on Zoom and it is virtual, it needs to be fairly focused so that a parent comes away with it and so, oh, this is, I got something out of this I didn't get from anywhere else. And what is that something?
Well, I think, I think where it makes it worthwhile is when A, it is hyper focused, and B, if the family is from CB3, in this case, School District 1, that the resources are coming from the neighborhood. So, if, like I said, if we want to give like a 5-minute spiel to every CBO that can provide services with hyperlinks in the chat or even a Google Doc that the families can take away with virtually, in the virtual space that they can now keep as a resource, I think that's helpful. But I think there's still space to have conversations with folks, like Children's for Advocates or Include NYC or any of these other organizations, because they are dealing with the special needs population and their families. And so they know sort of what has been coming more to a forefront, and we can have conversations with them. Maybe we can do a planning conversation with them and say, give us like 2 topics that have been, they would know what the 2 topics are because they're being asked these questions all the time. And we can create a panel of experts, if you will, around the topic. But I think maybe if we tailor it to those 2 topics where they take away resources, not just virtually, but also, through a hyperlink that they can then keep and save it to their drive or whatever, print it out. And maybe we can email it afterwards as well. So that way it's in their inboxes. That becomes an hour worth your time versus, or an hour and a half worth your time versus something that, it's not.
Okay, so are we saying that we need to have, well, okay, there's quite a few people here on this committee who do education, like Thomas, there's Shirley, Deborah. Do we know what those 2 topics are, or do we want to have this, conversation with, or, talk to like Advocates for Children to find out what the 2 hot topics are? And if we know what it is now, we should just say so. If we don't, then somebody should volunteer to go contact them.
I would defer to Naomi to state what that content area is.
Anyone else?
May?
Yes.
A lot of the things that happen, especially in District 75, they're very school specific. I would entertain having members from the committee maybe submit certain topics, and then we can cross-reference them with Naomi, because I know for a fact, there's certain things that affect my community and the school that we service. For example, I'm very proud that we've got 5 of our students graduating this year in our inclusion program, and they're graduating with Regents credentials. And there's some parents that are not even aware that that's an option. And, 2 of my guys are 20 years old, but they knocked it out. And, maybe, highlighting some of the successes of those kind of programs, as well as just letting parents know, like, hey, your kids, have viable career opportunities afterward. A lot of times they don't even know about OPWDD. I mean, they hear about these things, but it becomes like a shock for them when this child turns 21. They say, well, what is my kid gonna do now that they're not going to your school? So I think it might be effective if we can just have some specific topics for each of us where we're at, even the students that Paul Wrangle works with, and just submit them, and then we could kind of like flesh them out to the final two.
All right.
We
So
can still have, and we had originally said that we wanted to feature like a student. We can still do that as well. We can have like the student as part of the panel. There's a Chalkbeat just did a profile on a D75 child, Lucas Healy, which his mom is the one that I actually had come over here and speak to CB3 about sort of District 75 needs. And he has become sort of like a little activist in speaking out, like, about, his want for people to remind others that they exist and they're in these spaces. And, he went to a PEP meeting and he asked the members to see me, which was incredibly powerful, and I was sobbing. But there's still spaces that we can create to highlight students like that as part of the discussion as well.
So do we? I don't see.
Can I just ask a question? I just want to make a comment. I mean, the more it's hard to separate. Sorry, it's late. It's hard to separate for me. What this was looking like in the before times, and how we're trying to take this and shape it to provide maximum benefit in the shortest amount of time in a way that makes sense. Because being on Zoom, we all know it's not the same thing as being with people. But on some level, if there were multiple topics that are of interest to people, I know that we're trying to sort of streamline it so that you don't have to end up doing breakout rooms or doing things like it almost feels like there's a program, you're coming up with programs. So there's almost like a plenary where, as you describe, an elevator pitch from different organizations talking about what it is that they do and the services that they provide. And even like a basic Q&A with those folks. But it does seem like there are specific needs that folks are going to want to address in a more intimate setting. So I guess I say all that to say, I'm kind of torn between trying to take a 90-minute thing or a 60-minute thing and have two specific things that people can pick and choose one of those things, or they attend both, or whether it's a more structured offering of more things, almost like an unconference, if anybody's ever attended an unconference. So I'm just actually thinking out loud, trying to figure out how to take the real world thing and shape it into something that will be sort of comparable in the online space.
Well, I think what we can do both. I think what we can do is we can provide Q&A spaces in these conversations. But what I found is that a lot of families, when it comes to, like, they often pose questions in a general sense when it's really related to their own personal situation. And they're really like, no one's going to raise their hand and say, I have no food in my fridge. How can I get food? They'll say, well, how can one get access to a food pantry? So I think, like, if we allow spaces, if there's related to education for families to ask questions, but then give them a contact so they can get into more specifics about their own personal situation. I think that helps as well, because not everyone is willing to be as forthcoming. But as long as they have something that they will then take on their own and make a phone call or send an email later on their own to get those resources, I think that would be helpful.
Could we actually, I kind of like Thomas's suggestion that we collect some topics and then decide what's the best way to present it. Is it like a short little 1 hour thing, or is it like this big conference? You know, I've been to all these kind of events, and, you know, I mean, it can be deadly or not. You know, it depends. So, you know, I've been to some that are short and they're really good, and there's some that are long that are not that good. I'm talking about online. I'm not even talking about in person. So is there a group of people here who are willing to, or somebody willing to volunteer to collect those topics and bring it to the next meeting?
Yeah.
If we, I mean, there's like no one, yeah.
I see Tati volunteering.
Yeah.
Okay.
By that, you just mean asking board members what their topics are, right?
Right. I mean, we need topics now. So the topic sometimes tells you the format, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
So, you know, I hear Naomi kind of like talking about, you know, this different things, because there are a lot of interconnection between different things. And then there are very hyper specific topics. And then I would also like to hear from Gigi, because she did say some about being able to support. And just, could you further clarify, further elaborate, Gigi?
Yeah, so pre-COVID, we, for example, played a leadership role in organizing a forum with Community Board 2 on, it was mostly focused on the need to increase seats for kids with autism. And so we did a whole actual, at the Sheen Center, we had a whole program with experts, with parents, with the private schools that focus on serving kids with autism, on how to navigate the IEP process to correctly or kind of best advocate for your child during that process. And so all of it was co-sponsored by a lot of overlapping electeds as well as the CEC. And so we were able to help kind of put the program together and advertise it and do, you know, all of that stuff. So we are happy to do that or do something differently, kind of whatever help, you know, we can lend a hand to.
I'll actually say I was also in attendance of the event you did around dyslexia.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was dyslexia.
With, yeah, with CC. So I think, you know, it was super interesting, and it was really, it was super helpful. So I just think that if we can decide on what issues we want to present, I think we can have a really incredible resource for all the parents in CB3.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful. So everyone, should we ask the office to co-sponsor as well? I mean, we could. And also, Gigi, would the office be able to provide language assistance, translation assistance?
I guess it would depend on the format of the event.
Oh.
Only because there are, you know, if it's a highly specialized topic, I just don't know how much, you know, if we would have to pay for an interpreter or if we could do it in-house. If we could do it in-house, I'd certainly be happy to lend a staffer to do that.
Okay. Susan?
I'm going to suggest that if one of our council offices is supporting, we should also reach out to the other one.
Yeah, okay, yeah. No, I agree. So we would, Gigi's here, but we should also reach out to some Carlina in her office.
Yes, yes.
Okay, it would be good to have, yeah, I think we've always had good events with the 2 city council members supporting.
Because
okay, so
members.
I'm sorry?
Because we have the 2 best council members.
Yes, we do. All right, so Tatiana is going to collect the ideas or the topics.
Yep.
We will continue another planning discussion at the next meeting. The topics may tell us the formatting. Right, we need to contact Carlina Rivera's office.
Who's going to do that?
I can do that as well in CCU if that's wanted.
Okay. What was the other thing? Do we have a timeline in terms of a date, or should we decide that next month?
I think we should maybe decide that once we have a better idea of what the scope is, because we might, if it's a longer event, I don't know.
Yeah, we need more time now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll save that for next month. Anything else we need to discuss for this topic, for this planning?
I just have a comment quickly. I think that, I guess we need to get the topics that folks are interested in, but I'm hearing from like Naomi that it might still be helpful to do kind of like a general thing at the beginning that's inviting CBOs to speak about the services, and even, you know, Eric sharing the Vision Urbana pantry form, like things like that can be shared in the beginning. So even as we narrow down the topic, I do like the idea of having like a forum where we have more general, you know, an opportunity to connect folks to more general services as well. Still centering the group that we have been wanting to center. But yeah, that's just a comment that I had. And maybe, you know, like Gigi said, you know, maybe somebody from the office wouldn't be able to translate for the more specialized version topics that we're speaking about, but maybe in the beginning with general services, somebody could. So I don't know, maybe this is a two-part event like Deborah was saying, but that's just my comment.
Yeah, I would say we'd also want to, you know, address vaccinations. And I know, you know, one of the things that has been coming up is the apprehension to vaccinations, or how, like the accessibility for that. So maybe that's part of it, you know, that we're actually just making a general information for parents in our community to just get resources of all kinds. I mean, Naomi brought up a lot of issues that are not around special ed or anything else, but they're just life issues. And we have so many resources and so many CBOs in the community that provide these resources, that this could be a really great time to just offer all of that to our constituents.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a great idea. Just remember, if we can find an interactive way to do this, or one where there's not that much talking, when there's like person after person talking. So we can talk about that later, but you know, if you know what I mean. So I will think about it, but just remember, I've been to, you know, when there's a lot of people talking, sometimes it's a bit much. Just like today, the presentation, there was a lot of talking from the presenter. Anyway, okay, so is there, but I agree with that. I mean, does everyone agree with that, that there should be resources presented and a wide range of resources, because these students need everything?
I think we should also compile these resources beforehand, make sure that we have a good database so that we can send them out to people who request it afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure we're very organized with that. That's going to be the big takeaway from this for parents.
Okay.
May, I was going to say, some of these organizations, I mean, they've been pillars of the community a long time. I'm sure they have some promotional videos. I think it would be effective to have some kind of just snippets, 20, 30-second snippets from each of the organizations. Just give us a little variety. And that would be something we had entertained doing that with another committee in terms of like revitalizing the arts. And I just think like if some of them sent us promotional stuff, I wouldn't even mind editing that just to have it, concise, and then it could be presented and they could say, wow, yeah, I want to use that. And then they'd have a hyperlink that they can click and access it. So I wouldn't mind entertaining, asking some of the organizations about what do they have. So that way, it's kind of easy promotion and it's not like 50 people talking.
Okay.
Is this Zoom registered like a webinar, in that at least, because I'm thinking ahead, I'm thinking like once we create this thing, how do we get people into a database, like was mentioned before, that you can then outreach to people afterwards? So maybe I don't, my assistant does this. I don't know how she does it. I'm happy to use our CEC account because it's paid by DOE, and it has, I don't know what the limit is. I think it's like 300 or something. But there's a registration link that the person will enter their first name, last name, and their email, and it compiles a database. And if we collect all these resources, we can put them all like in a Google folder of some sort, and we can send it out to everyone afterwards.
Okay. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
I was just gonna.
Very easy to do. When you send out the original invite, you just ask them to register and they click on the registration link, and then
Right,
it
that's how
all
you
happens
capture.
automatically.
Okay, so we could, okay. All right. Okay, so that's,
Sorry.
Tatiana, one more, anything
Yeah,
else?
sorry. I was just going to add too that I think that next month we should also speak more about, outreach for this event, and, just how we're going to get the folks who really need these resources most there, and how we're going to make the event like as accessible to them as well. It can't just be like a standard Zoom meeting. I like the idea that Thomas brought up about the video. But yeah, I just think that we should make an effort to talk about outreach and how it's different now in this virtual world. But yeah.
Okay.
So it's interesting because I was speaking with a school district in Maryland today, and one of the things that they did in order to give access to their students was to use a local TV channel. And I'm wondering if that's something that would be available to us, or something, so when kids don't have access to computers or internet, they can actually, or parents can watch something on a TV channel. And I don't know if we have that, but it would be interesting.
You mean they watch our thing on TV?
They actually have recorded school and they put it on their local, Prince George's County TV station. I don't like
a public access channel.
But it's kind of interesting, like pretty cool.
So I know in the Bronx, there's been a couple of CECs that have used their public access channel to do that. As far as School District 1, I'm happy to report that every single child that requested a device has a device. So, snaps up to that. But, maybe that is something that we can entertain. Maybe we can ask, I don't have any connections on that. And, the Manhattan Network channel, the MNN, and see if they be willing to carry, maybe it's a Gail thing. Cause I think Gail did that. Gail publicized her town hall last year on the public access network.
This is Gigi. We can reach out. Margaret has been a speaker on their show several times a year, so we can reach out and ask.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay. Great. Okay, thank you.
You mean just for that one event, right? I just want to make sure I'm asking the correct thing. You would want the event that we're planning to be broadcasted over TV?
Is that what you're saying,
the one
Shirley?
event?
The one event.
That parents would have access, like parents that don't have internet access or, whatever, so that there would be another way to access this information.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to reach out and then circle back with, I'll circle back with May and Naomi.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, okay, so we will move on because it's getting rather late. So we're in the any CAB or CEC reports. Yeah, okay.
May.
Can you, yeah, I see you. Yeah,
Okay.
just go ahead and
Yeah,
I have
very
some
quickly.
planning stuff, so, okay.
Sure. So very quickly, I attended the Gouverneur CAB this week. Two most important topics that were discussed were, of course, vaccines, distribution of the vaccines, how to get the information out to the public about the availability, and how to help people get scheduled. Dr. Gagliardi there at the hospital is doing a lot of outreach. He is willing to work with any organization that feels that they have information on groups, buildings, shelters, etc., that are not being served. As you know, that there is a big push now with the mayor's office to start taking the vaccines mobile units into the housing, into public housing, into shelters, so that we can reach out to the more vulnerable populations. I was also able to mention to Dr. Gagliardi about the building on Worth Street that Trevor brought up, and I put the two of them into connected with each other to discuss how better to serve that building. The second topic of importance was Advocacy Day. So we have several volunteers who are going to participate in an Advocacy Day regarding budgeting for our health and hospitals for these safety net hospitals. We know that there is a planned cut for Medicaid across the board, and we want to make sure that this cut is not going to affect the safety net hospitals and make them more vulnerable. We want to make sure that they are preserved and that they are not adversely affected by the planned cut. I'm one of the advocates, so we'll be participating in a session to get information on that, get our talking points together, and we'll be meeting with our state representatives. So I don't know if anything else, Eric, if you wanted to add anything.
He may not be here. Okay. Okay, thank you. So, well, that wasn't Worth Street, was it? It was his building on Rutgers, right?
It was
No, it was Worth Street.
It was 82 Rutgers.
Oh, it was Rutgers? Oh,
It was 82 Rutgers.
Oh, okay. So then
But
he was.
it's a 202 building, so it's a federal HUD building. So
okay.
We should connect on it though, because we're all duplicating each other's work. So if this was successful, then we should know, so we won't continue on that.
Okay, so leading
I'll
to
keep
that,
you in the loop. Yeah. Oh,
okay.
sorry. Yeah, I'll keep you in the loop, Susan. I'll connect you.
Okay.
Yeah,
great,
May and I
thanks.
actually have a meeting tomorrow on vaccines also. So it'd be, if we could let us know.
It's tomorrow?
I think so. Or is it tomorrow or?
Tomorrow's Friday. Okay, we'll talk
I
about
know.
it later.
There's an extra there. Every 5 minutes, someone comes up with another vaccine meeting. So this one is from the mayor's office, and I thought I forwarded to you. And it
okay.
just.
I'll look. You may
Okay.
have.
Okay.
Oh, that was, I'm sorry. There was one other thing on vaccines. We do have a subcommittee that will be discussing vaccines and topics surrounding them. One in particular is how to help people register who may be low tech, who may be disabled, who may not have help in their homes. So that's one thing we are going to be focusing on.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm gonna now get back to the planning for future meetings. This is our we are in the we're in the we're in the new old business agenda item now. So we, okay, so, remember last time Trevor, mentioned his building on Rutgers Street, how, they needed, a vaccination site. So we, so I called around a little bit. I talked to, Chung Pak, which is the senior building in Chinatown, and they were interested. Then they talked about another building, and then they circled back to they talked to Hamilton Madison, and this little email chain started going, and they circled back to Trevor's building. So me and Susan were thinking it would be good to have a list of these buildings with a lot of seniors and submit it to somebody, as a list of buildings that needs to have on-site vaccination. So of course, it's not going to be tomorrow, but we need to start that list. And we were wondering if any of the committee members were interested in helping to compile that list. Anyone raise their hand? Carmen or Eric, do you?
I only know of one senior building in our area that got mass vaccination, and that's the JASA building on 5th and Bowery.
We want to know who hasn't received them.
Well, that's the thing. That's the only one I know that did receive them. As far as who did and who didn't, that's still something up in the air. And I literally had a meeting about that this afternoon with my office and the smaller HDFCs in the area, who they're looking to see how they can get vaccines.
Who is that? Can people mute? Someone is listening to something about Bernie Sanders. Can you mute, please?
Maybe if everybody could just list the buildings that they know that they're aware of, that are senior residences, and if possible, if what kind of, if they're 202, that kind of thing. I think JASA is Section 8, right?
No, JASA is Section 202.
It is 202, okay. Because it may be that some, different types of building need to get the vaccination from, some from federal, some from city, some from state.
Right.
Eric is putting...
I know that the in terms of NYCHA, their senior buildings are also getting the vaccines.
But they're getting it from the city, I'm assuming. And I know that started.
Right.
So how did we want to, should we get this list? Should we just send you emails, Susan?
You could do that. Just put senior residents in the subject matter would help, and let me know of what senior residences you're aware of. I don't know how many there are, and I don't know if there's a way to get a listing. I guess I can try also to get a listing for our community. Gigi, would you know? Are you still there?
I'm
You
still
left your
here.
name. Yeah. Do you know if there's any way to get a listing of senior residences in CB3? Is there anyone that might have that?
Our office has a pretty comprehensive list because Margaret is aging chair or chair of the aging committee. I'm sorry. Yeah. So we have, we're working on a really strongly worded letter on how we think the city should be prepared for the next round of vaccinations that we know are coming to the city, and sort of how to prioritize them with a focus on seniors. Certainly NYCHA senior buildings, many of the buildings that you referenced have reached out to us individually to be asked to put on the list. Also buildings with anything that's designated a NORC. And we have forwarded all those to the city's vaccine command center. So if you want to give us a list, we can make sure that all of the buildings that you suggest. Probably, you know, will also straddle some of Carlina's buildings, that those are on the list at the VCC.
So is the city vaccinating like the HUD buildings?
So as far as I know, and this information changes like hour to hour, they're not dividing it by HUD versus 202 versus, it's happened. We don't really know how determinations are being made, which buildings are getting what and why they're prioritized, other than when they share with us, for example, they had picked 4 NYCHA developments, you know, as a pilot, and then they're going to expand it to more. We don't know which ones exactly, you know, all that information sort of comes out whenever the mayor shares them with us at his, you know, morning press conferences.
Is it true? It seems like they're all NYCHA buildings, which is why I assume that the city was just doing what they consider city seniors.
Yes, there is a big focus and an expansion right now on NYCHA buildings, but you know, like the council member wanted to be more specific. Like we felt like NYCHA senior buildings should get them first, right?
Right.
Right. So those are sort of some of the differentiations of what the council member would like to see as like a high priority focus, and then kind of going outwards.
So it sounds like you're already doing what we were talking about doing. And, you know, maybe we can just send you the list of buildings, and if there's anything you don't already have.
Yeah, we're happy to do that. And of course, CB3 covers more than just Margaret. So we're happy to submit a larger list if there's some overlap with Carlina's office as well.
I think very little. I think, you know, the Meltzer, Jessa, but I think there's very little.
Yeah, in CB3, the only 2, because Chompak's actually in CB1, but they were on our list anyway. But
we adopt them.
282 Cherry and
82 Rutgers?
180 Eldridge, the senior building on Eldridge are the only 2 senior NYCHA buildings in Board 1.
Oh, okay. There's all this stuff in the chat box. So Eric just put in a bunch of addresses. I think they're mainly NYCHA. And Eric, instead of sending it to Gigi, why don't you send it to Susan, because other people might be giving Susan addresses, and then Susan will consolidate and send it off to Gigi. So it's, you know, so just we're streamlined.
Sounds good.
All right, Eric?
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay. So let's see. Okay, so we're done with this, and it's getting really late. So, well, the only other things we had, which we don't have to discuss today, we can do it next month, is I thought it might be nice for Susan to give us more information about what she does at the office. And one of the big things she talks about a lot is district service cabinet. I don't know if you know what it is exactly. Actually, for a long time, I didn't quite know what it was. But there always seemed to be a lot of meetings, you know, about all kinds of things. So, and actually many of those things are related to our committee areas. So do we want to hear about this now, or do we want to wait till the next meeting?
Carmen's saying the next meeting, I think.
I'd say next meeting.
Okay, next meeting. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, and then the other thing, just to let you know, is that, you know, we also, this can be the next meeting. You know, remember how we used to have those panels? We had a couple of panels once with service providers. They came and they talked about their, you know, what they were doing and what they saw the needs of the community were. So it, you know, had been very helpful to us, and especially for district needs. And sometimes we, you know, used it in district needs. Sometimes we had a little call out section to highlight the stories that they told. The last one we did, I think, was on health clinics, the federally qualified healthcare centers. So we can talk about it at another meeting if we want to do a panel again, maybe on a different topic. We've covered seniors centers, we've covered federally qualified healthcare centers. We did one on education that focused on students with disabilities. We've never done one on homelessness, so that's an open topic, and there might be others. So we'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting. Any questions?
How about goals? Are you going to talk about goals at all?
Oh, the goals.
For next month, to put on the agenda for next month?
Oh, to talk about goals. No, I'm not talking about them now.
Yeah.
Okay. Good night, Gigi. So we will, yeah, so one of the other things I think, and this is for all committees, is to, discuss together, what some of the goals we might want for our committee. I think so, it has been done a little bit, but we haven't done it in a while. And that'll also, we don't have to talk about it now, but just to let you know, it's something that's coming up and you can think about it and we can talk about it at a future meeting.
So I think
that's it. Yeah. So
next month, I think that Israel's going to come give us a status report.
He has said that he will come. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, I haven't confirmed the date with them, but they did say March.
Okay, great.
Susan, you answered my question. I'll lower my hand.
See, we followed up after because we brought it up.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, and we have not contacted actually the Department of Education about having them. And we wanted to have them come and speak. We haven't contacted them yet, but we still could, or we could do it after the resource fair.
What was that about?
Remember where we wanted that when we were talking about the IEPs and how there was a big problem about how they weren't, really proactively, helping students to readjust their IEPs, and parents kind of do it themselves, in light of this whole pandemic, and they're all learning at home. So that was one of the things we said we could invite to come, but so Shirley, I know you had suggested it. Thomas, you might have some ideas, but we just need they need to be contacted, but we just need a little bit more wording on what exactly are we asking them to come for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess I suppose it would have to do a little bit with what we glean from information about the symposium that we're going to conduct. Perhaps that will inform what we want to ask.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's actually what I was thinking. We'll have done this and then we can go to them and say, this is what we heard. Okay. So this is it. We're going to any vote to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. All right. Thomas.
Okay. May, Larissa, David?
Yes, here.
Eric? Shirley?
Yes.
Deborah?
Here.
Tatiana?
Yep.
Heidi?
Yes.
Ricky?
Yes.
And Carmen?
Yes.
Thank you.
You got everyone?
Got everyone. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Yeah, okay. Oh, don't forget everybody, we have to go to transportation, Joint Health Human Services Transportation meeting. Is it Tuesday, David? Or did he leave?
It's Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Tuesday.
Right. It's the do you guys know the topic, right? It's to talk about that the resolution, borough board resolution on some kind of a.
The Harlem 5.
Right, yes, yes. I know that was the issue. I forgot what it was. Was something in the Central Park, some sort of,
Right.
The thing from the old days, the horrible thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if it's at our
Yes.
committee, I'll definitely be there.
Very good.
I'm not following this stuff closely enough, obviously.
Right, so it's at transportation. It starts at 6:30. We go in the beginning and then we talk about it, pass a resolution, and then we can leave.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great
thank
evening,
you.
everyone.
Good
Okay.
night. Be safe.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.